Time's your flight?
Ready?
I'll leave sometime. I think
Hello, everyone. I'm going to call this regular meeting of City Council of April 14th, 2026 to order. If you would, I would want to welcome everyone who's here in attendance and those who are joining us online. Also want to recognize Alice Howard, our County Council Chairperson's here. Awesome. And if you would, please stand for the invocation and pledge of allegiance by Mayor Pro Tem Mike McPhee.
If it is your custom, please join us to bow in prayer. Father God, as we gather in this place, may you shower your blessings upon each of us and prepare our hearts for the things that we will be discussing. Help us to be a blessing in the way we speak and act. Let everything we discuss here be in alignment with your word, and may we speak with humility when presenting our ideas. Help us to admit our mistakes and be willing to act upon the solutions people give us. May your glory and peace fill this meeting. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next on the agenda is public comment, and this is for both agenda and non-agenda items. So I'm going to call out some names who've already signed up to speak. First is either Yancey or George O'Kelly. And please give us your name and your address when you come to the podium.
My name is Judith. George told me the microphone was funny. My name is Yancey O'Kelly. I live at 2007 North Street downtown. George and I live in the Glebe on North Street, 2 blocks from Rebo Road, 2 blocks from Buford Elementary. I'm here today to talk about short-term rentals. Short-term rentals themselves are not the problem. There is an ordinance pertaining to regulations about their maintenance, occupation, rental to a specified number based on the number of bedrooms, off-street parking, no parking in the street. Regulations might be tighter, but compliance and density are the issues. Based on George's and my experience, there's a lot left to be desired. Those who are responsible owners, basically, you really are not aware of their status, the rental status, except for different people residing at their residence from time to time. But that is not true in some cases. I was talking with a friend who lives in Mossy Oaks, not too far from Beaufort Middle. A long-term resident of Beaufort, now 90 plus, was verbally accosted by a renter for mowing his lawn according to the renter too early in the day. Very close to that house, 5 police cars came to that house. It was a short-term rental to address issues. In our experience, contacting the compliance office is not helpful. Until speaking with him, I did not know short-term rentals are considered situational. When owners are there, it's their home. But when they're not there, then the short-term rental regulations apply. Again, situational. So then many cars can be in the street. At one time, there was an event and there were cars sticking out from North Street to King Street, the next street over. And we called the police because we got no satisfaction from them. And when the police came, the policeman said, "What ordinance? What are you talking about?" And so about that time, somebody shot somebody, so they had to go. And then when they came back, well, it was a little nerve-wracking to me. But anyway, when they came back, one of the policemen who was more seasoned said, "Yes, there is an ordinance." But if there's a policeman that might be called about something, they surely need to know that there is an ordinance that they need to go by. As I said, in our experience, contacting the compliance office is not helpful. He was the one that explained to us that it's situational. With the homeowner there, property owner, I'm not gonna say home, property owner, then they're acting as if they occupy the home. But when he's not there, then it's a short-term rental and those apply. And I have seen very good people who rent their places because they have informed early on what the requirements are. There might be posted trash cans come in, trash is not left in the yard. But one night, I do stay up late. One night when it was allegedly short-term rental, basically men were in and out all night. So being 79, I peeped out to see what it was. And there was a woman in her underwear in the yard. Now, what that was about, I do not know. But there were quite a lot of people. So there's that. We did call the compliance officer one more time. Before we could explain the full nature of our call, he said it was the property owner's house, again, situational. So I want some clarification for that because I'm just going to lie down. I don't care what they do. George called the city manager. City manager said he would get back to George, look into it. George never heard back. I know the Point residents are concerned if their neighborhood is so designated short-term rental eligible. For those of you who are here, George and I lived on the Point for 16 years. It was Mayberry. If we couldn't find one of our children, everybody went looking for them until they found them when they were little. We lived across from Mayor Cromer's in-laws, and I tell you, it was a sad time when we left that neighborhood because they were so fine and everybody there was so fine. So I understand the concern. I wouldn't know what to do about the Point except for squeaky wheel gets attention. Oh, okay. So I think I've made my point clear. I think short-term rentals, I wish there were no such thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, next is Jared Madison.
Council and staff, thank you. My name is Jared Madison. I reside at 2618 Holmes Road, and that's in Mossy Oaks. And I'm gonna go off script a little bit because I was gonna talk about short-term rentals, but then I kind of got sidetracked of how I originally got in tune with everything going around in the city. And that was employee parking and the representation of a not so represented group of people. And I have a speech written. The title of this speech is Irrelevant. As I sit on the park bench within my mind, melancholy fills my sentence. The awareness of my irrelevancy has blossomed in due season. Erring greatly, my naivety has cost me more than I have in my pockets to pay with. But what is the value of sanctity without the cohort of empathy? I have mistakenly deduced commiseration as a natural characteristic of human beingness, a grave error indeed. It is now apparent to me that the cries of the least organized and least powerful frequently fall on deaf ears. I have sat in meetings where citizen-friendly ordinances were fast-tracked to solutions with such ease and fluidity that envious caterpillars might rethink the process of obtaining wings. I have seen neighborhoods unite over proposals they deemed imbalanced, only to find resolution replacing the space where discontent once lived. And yet, when the request comes from those who power the city every day, our service workers, our employees, the very people who sustain Beaufort's economy, it is delayed, studied, and too often left unresolved. And yet over time, that sends a message. It tells the small, the working, and the unrepresentatives that their needs are less than urgent and their voices less valued. It tells the small, but I must not falter and believe this false ideal. How dare I? Power and perseverance run through my veins. My DNA holds the keys that unlocked the shackles of slavery and stood tall in the face of Jim Crow. My spirit has crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge without fear nor hesitation. I am not irrelevant, and neither are they. The individuals who struggle daily to simply access their place of work are not invisible. They are essential. And when we fail to act for them, not out of inability, but delay, we are just postponing policy. We are deciding who matters. And I will leave you with this quote: as you did for one of the least of these, you did for me. Because the city is not defined by how it serves the most organized or most powerful, but how it responds to those who have the least leverage, yet carry the greatest burden, greatest weight. They are relevant. And, you know, it's amazing to see the Point in the communities, different communities come out to these events. But these individuals who some of them I've grown to know, and council, I've grown to know a lot of you too, and I know you care, but they understand how organization and where organization can get them. Some individuals, and it's in that 18 to 40-year-old range, that the people that don't come out to vote don't feel like government cares about them. They're not going to organize because they don't feel like their voices are heard. And something that's prevalent that I learned in life are super small acts go a long way. You just telling someone you love them, which is a simple 4-letter word, carries such dramatic weight that you can't even weigh it. And I think that as long as those people continue to feel overlooked, they'll eventually feel like they have no one to look to and no place to go, and eventually move on to another place. And that quote I left you with is because, you know, I was taught how amazing I am from an early age, and I know a lot more people, their parents taught them the same way. You know, I work with and am around people that might not be the case, where they're single moms struggling, they don't have childcare, they have to pull doubles, and then they have to walk maybe 2 blocks. It might not seem a lot, but it's something on top of what they're already going through. And I think that this amazing group of and governing body has the ability to do something. So thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Okay, next is Thomas Grigowski. Who happens to be my neighbor.
Hello. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Tom Skrgowski, and I'm from 123 Spanish Point Drive. I'm running for Beaufort County Council District 4. No, I'm not originally from Beaufort, but I spent 5 years here when I was a young PFC on the air station back in 2004. I bought my first car here. I went on my first date here, and I ordered my first drink here when I was 21. Then I moved away and re-enlisted when I chose to make the Marines a career. When I returned to Beaufort, I was an officer. I had a young family, and I bought my first house here. We were very fortunate. In the Marines, my family and I, we traveled the world together. And when the time came to retire and begin the next chapter of our lives, we chose to remain here in Beaufort because of all this area had to offer. Retiring from active duty gave me a very unique perspective to step back and observe things that I couldn't do when I was actively working. I worked for a year at Shell Ring Ale Works and really got to know the good citizens of Port Royal right here in the heart of the district and see what day-to-day life is like for the small business owner. I finished an internship at the probate court and learned all the behind-the-scenes aspect of the law and how it affects us on a daily basis. And because of the probate court, how family legacies are passed on to the next generation. I'm currently attending USCB and pursuing a degree in history with a focus on pre-law. God willing, I will finish this time next year. These next few weeks, I'll be out in the district asking my fellow neighbors what they find important about Beaufort and Port Royal and what they hold most dear, and how I can be a voice for them to our local leadership. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, next is Suzanne Schwank.
Thank you. I'm Suzanne Schwank. I live at 3 Rising Tide. I've lived in Beaufort 40 years, 17 of those in the Old Point and the last 11 years at Rising Tide. I commend council and staff for tackling STRs. Every tourist town has been just shaken by the STR tsunami, and they're all struggling to get a grip on the impacts. I'm here to oppose the removal of the STR ban from the point, which, far from getting a better grip, will spread the negative impacts. You know all the objections to STRs, but I want to share information about Highlands, North Carolina, which illuminates objections relative to ordinances. Highlands is a small, high-end tourist destination. Its STR ordinances address noise, trash, parking, occupancy limits, and rental agreement disclosures. Residents report violations to the code office in business hours and to 911 after hours. The Highlands newspaper reported that the fiscal year 2026 town budget included 2 additional police officers, quote, which town staff explicitly linked to handling 911 nuisance calls related to STRs, end quote. Short-term renters know the rules and they ignore the rules. Enforcement was not the answer in Highlands. Town council has now banned STRs in residential neighborhoods after 2027, not by phasing them out at point of sale. Every STR must cease operating after September 2027. Highlands is the primary generator of a $350 million annual tourism revenue in that county. Think about what that combination of facts reveals about the STR uprising that must have come from residents eligible to vote. The negative impacts of STRs are so well known that it was a shock to hear that some are advocating exposing more Beaufort residents. I've heard three arguments to justify it. One, the existing ban is spot zoning. The ban applies to an entire peninsula of 30 contiguous blocks. That's not spot zoning, it's just zoning. Number two, point residents don't want STRs, so no owner will have one, and the neighborhood will self-regulate. The Edward Means House on Pinckney has been unoccupied and on the market for over 9 months. It has over 5,700 square feet and no restrictions on adding interior remodeling for more bedrooms. What powers do point residents have to prevent the buyer converting it to an STR? If they have no power to self-zone, they have no power to self-regulate. Number three, privilege, or why should we treat the point differently? Because it is different. Its residents bear a disproportionate share of tourists continually, but it's why tourists flock there that make it different. Like the truism, they don't make any more waterfront, they're not making any more 18th and 19th century houses. Every one of these on the point is a private family home, as they have been for 175 to 300 years, except for the Bay Street houses in the Bluff, which I wish had a ban. There is no other neighborhood in the entire city where only 2 or 3 houses that convert from private residence to STR would irretrievably change the character of the historic landmark district. Use your imagination to tour the point 25 years from now. There's the castle, one of the most iconic historic homes in all of America. 7,900 square feet, and your guide says the castle was a private residence for over 175 years. Then just 3 people changed a law and made it an attractive target for out-of-town investor. Walk on to Marshlands, same story. Your guide tells you it was a private residence for over 200 years, but sadly, on to Tidal Home. Every tourist wants to see the Big Chill House, an STR investor's dream. I could go on, but you get the point. If you allow STRs, not only can you not prevent any of these iconic houses from leaving private hands, you guarantee that some of them will. Some may think that investors will not want to buy that type of house, that they're too expensive, and that's not what they have an interest in. I only want to say that does not take into account the next tsunami that's already hitting the country. As an AI summary would put it, quote, hedge funds and private equity companies such as Blackstone, KKR, and TPG are aggressively acquiring STDs, targeting single-family homes in order to build portfolios of high-end STR properties and prime vacation spots. High-end houses are targeted because their asset value is less volatile. The fact that these 18th and 19th century houses are all private residences is the glory of Beaufort. I don't live in the point, but I am the one who is privileged to live in a historic town where this is so. And I look to you to keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Beth Grace.
Good evening. Well, I'm a tag along apparently. There have recently been a lot of questions about one neighborhood or another being more special than others. And in my opinion, all neighborhoods have special features. But let's specifically examine the National Historic Landmark District. In the 1960s, Mayor Chambers and many local citizens petitioned the federal government to designate a 304-acre district in downtown Beaufort as a National Historic Landmark designation. From Bay Street, along the bluff, including all the business district, along to Haymar Street, over to Rebo Road, then along Boundary Street, around Bellamy Curve, up the eastern side of the Beaufort River and Carteret Street, is this federally designated historic district. That gives you an idea of the 304 acres. There are many neighborhoods in this area: the Bluff, the Core Commercial, Back Bay, the Glebe, the Point, the Northwest Quadrant, Old Commons, Higginsville. There are a lot of neighborhoods. And many mixed-use streets, such as Bladen and Charles and Duke. In fact, Scott Street, which is only 7 blocks long, has only 2 residential homes anymore. They're all STRs, or mixed-use businesses. And it's with pride that all of Beaufort values this landmark designation. It's the engine for $1.5 billion for tourism and other businesses. Beaufort County proudly boasts 2 out of 4 landmark districts in the state of South Carolina: Penn Center, Beaufort, Charleston, and Graniteville in Aiken. So there are specific guidelines on the status for inclusion. The National Park Service helps monitor the careful stewardship of the district. Partially because of the National Historic Landmark District, the National Park Service designated the Reconstruction Era Park in Beaufort, another feather in our cap. I'd like to read a few sentences from the 2024 National Park Survey that was done on the status of the district. They note warning signs to be aware in order to keep our designation. One of the most unusual features lies in the Northwest Quadrant and Old Commons, because after the Civil War and the emancipation of slaves, many freedmen constructed homes in those communities. There are very good examples, or very few examples, of original homes of freedmen in this entire country in a whole community. There might be individual examples, but this is a whole neighborhood. So these are quotes from that survey. Beaufort's local preservation ordinance and design review standards have been undermined by varied interpretations inconsistent with enforcement and limited understanding, all of which hinder preservation efforts. The assessment revealed that the historically overlooked African-American resources in the Northwest Quadrant have experienced the largest loss. The loss of these buildings that would now likely be considered contributing resources represent a disparity within the National Historic Landmark District as a whole. Additionally, the application of the Historic Preservation Ordinance and design guidelines in relation to development within the district and on its edges challenge ongoing preservation. End of quote. So in closing, we're asking, please cap STRs at 200 citywide and pass a 3% cap for neighborhoods. The Northwest Quadrant, Old Commons, and Higginsville already have 15 to 20% of their homes STRs. That threatens the residential quality of life, and it taxes them. It gives them a big burden tax-wise. These homes should remain homes, not used as businesses. I'd like to plead with City Council to adhere to the best preservation practices to ensure the National Historic Landmark District remains a designated and protected area. This stewardship requires limiting overdevelopment and helping longtime landowners keep and improve their treasured assets. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Next is Bobby Malia.
Thank you. Bobby Melia, 316 Hancock Street in the Point. Good evening. At the March 24th council work session, quite a few neighbors in the point appeared and made a comprehensive case as to why. Okay, thank you. All right, maybe that's better. As to why allowing short-term rentals in the point is bad, not only or even not even particularly for the point, but for the city as a whole. Most of us are here again, but rather than come up individually one after the other like we did last time, somebody drew the short straw, and I'm here to condense the arguments into 5 or 6 minutes. We began by recapping the history of how the exclusion of short-term rentals came about. And at that time, Beth Grace spoke about how the counselors at that time engaged with and listened to the residents and thought that there were sound public policy reasons. And we believe those public policy reasons persist today. And then one by one, members came up and talked through those reasons. We noted that Beaufort is reliant on a large tourist industry, $1 billion a year plus, roughly 1 million visitors a year. And going to visit the point is the number one thing that visitors do. We pointed out the 17 different organized tours that go through the point. They all use the same narrow streets. They all essentially head to the same 1 acre. Beaufort has 15,600 acres of land, not including the marsh and the creeks. And a vast majority of these tourists come to just 1 acre. That's what they want to see, as we all know. And it's this funnel effect where on a good day, you get 1,000 tourists maybe in a neighborhood with 225 residents. So you're outnumbered 5 to 1. That makes the point so fragile and stresses the point. There are a lot of micro factors that residents talked about at the March meeting that magnify the impacts. The streets are among the most narrow in the cities. There are oak trees growing out of several of the streets, effectively reducing them to one-way lanes. As you get deeper into the point, the sidewalks tend to disappear. Many houses don't have driveways, so even the residents are forced to compete for parking with the constant array of work vehicles. Being 19th century houses, they require constant maintenance and upkeep. And then you combine that with the golf carts and the minibuses and the private vehicles and the horse carriages. And now we want to allow party houses in the points. Well, we know where that's going to end. And it's not a theoretical danger that may happen some year in the future. We know there's a house on the point now. We know it's impossible for residents to self-regulate. It's a clear and present danger that could happen any minute after such a law is passed. That's why we presented the photo at that session to dramatize that. We then went on to cite example after example from other historic cities throughout the Southeast, throughout the United States, and indeed around the world, where citizens are in effect in open revolt in some cities against their town governments because they've been overrun. We don't want that to happen here. Nobody wants that to happen here. We can't imagine that any counselor wants that to happen here. We moved on then to the process that that was followed to put this amendment to a vote, and noted that the process ignored the recommendation, the unanimous recommendation of the Planning Commission, which spent months on this issue and took public testimony. It ignored the recommendation of the city's professional staff. And while there was some talk that, well, it's only 6%, and there's 300 feet, it turned out that all the I's and T's had not been really nailed down, and no one in the room, not the counselors, not the staff, and least of all the residents, really knew 6% of what. We couldn't even agree, the people in the room, where the point began. So we asked that the council slow down and rethink, and you have, and we appreciate that. And finally, we drew the obvious conclusion was that the amendment really offers no public purpose and no public benefit. There was consideration that it might level the playing field between neighborhoods. It might be a kind of a one-size-fits-all solution, but really, imagine yourself in the position of a homeowner in Mossy Oaks or the Quadrant who's surrounded by a cluster of these things, and peace and quiet has been stolen. It's not going to help you to have one of these iconic homes turned into a party house. We know where that's going. It's going to destroy the charm and authenticity of the point, and employment depends on that. Tax revenue depends on that. Public services depend on that. So this is not an issue that is just for the Point residents. Yes, as somebody said, the Point is a fairly cohesive and well-organized neighborhood. So we're here to speak on that issue, but it really does affect everyone who works in the hospitality industry, who offers services, whether they be legal, accounting, maintenance services, whether you depend on city services that depend on the funding. So we urge the council not to move forward with this amendment, which essentially pits citizen against citizen and neighborhood against neighborhood, but instead step back and try and find a solution that works for all neighborhoods and all citizens. We know that people have been working hard. We know that you've all been meeting intensely since that time, with one-on-one meetings over coffee, small group meetings, big meeting at the library, multi-neighborhoods represented. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for listening. And we hope to work with you to create a solution for every neighborhood and every citizen of Beaufort.
Thank you. Next, we have Paul Trask. And I would ask everybody going forward, please keep it to 5 minutes because we got quite a few people that want to speak.
I'm going to speak about something a little bit different. I think it's the most important issue on your agenda tonight. You've got a very big crowd here tonight. It's a long agenda. I'm going to give a copy of my statement I'd like it to be included in the permanent record. I want to read something first. I don't know under South Carolina 57040 if the resolution for $1 million grant is legal, but even if it is, it's wrong to do it by resolution. Should be done by an ordinance with 2 readings and a public hearing. Tonight, you have this very long agenda, and this resolution is stuck all the way at the back. How do you expect the public to be aware you're handing out $1 million under these circumstances, and particularly with other major expenses looming, not the least of which is the waterfront park? For a city that talks frequently about transparency, this is wrong. So I want to speak specifically about agenda item 9A, which is the second reading for the sale of city property to Clarendon. Congratulations, that really is a good deal. $2.2 million really bails out much of what is a failed city commerce park. However, I urge you to substitute the city of Beaufort as the licensee in lieu of the Beaufort County Economic Development Commission under Exhibit D. There's no operational reason to insert BCEDC as an intermediary. The city can contract directly for this work with proper insurance and liability protections, including another entity unnecessarily removes control and reduces transparency. I also want to speak primarily about agenda item 10.I, which is a resolution to grant transfer of $1 million from the proceeds of this sale to the Beaufort County Economic Development Commission. I want to give you a couple. This is not a policy disagreement. It's a question of financial accountability and stewardship of public assets. Here are a couple of examples. Glassworks, documented failure following public promotion. In 2019 to 2020, Glassworks project was presented to this community as a $15 million investment, 60 jobs. It's a green manufacturing anchor tenant, a validation of the Commerce Park strategy. That narrative was publicly touted by county council members and the BCEDC director, Mr. O'Toole. The outcome is now clear. The company is no longer operating. It's not an active entity in South Carolina. Its website has disappeared. The municipal contract with the city of Savannah collapsed when Glassworks stopped performing. Savannah confirmed the shutdown was due to an unexpected halt of operations by the vendor. Mayor Van Johnson said the contractor stopped. This was not a market fluctuation. It was non-performance by Glassworks. Approximately $485,000 in incentives were tied to this project. Exhibit B, document right from Beaufort County Economic Development. Yet promised outcomes were not delivered. Today, 84,000 square feet of building is sitting vacant. It's an active listing with Avison Young Realty out of Charleston. I called them up. It's an active listing. They wanted me to find someone to go in there. I told them I didn't know who was going to take 84,000 square feet. And now we're talking about giving $1 million that's going to be used for a spec building. Well, you got a spec building sitting there right now. You don't need another one. Number two, public asset, private gain without clear accounting. Magnus. You might remember Magnus. This transaction raises a more serious issue. Publicly owned city asset was conveyed for nominal consideration. The deed says $5. I think there was some other consideration. There might have been some other funds expended public funds expended to support Magnus. The same asset was sold 2.5 years later for $7.5 million by Magnus to Metro P. I can't be out of time already.
5 minutes.
That's unbelievable. Well, I urge you to vote to substitute Beaufort County Economic Development Commission and vote no on this resolution. It shouldn't be done by resolution, and it's just wrong. It should have been done. It should be exhibited much more in public. So that's it.
Skipping the call. Next is Mayor Deckard.
Good evening, Council. I'd like to personally thank the mayor this evening because I had actually emailed him and about, well, the fact that I thought he had a conflict with this Commerce Park $1 million payment because he's on the board of the Beaufort Economic Development Corporation, and he agreed with me very quickly the same day. So thank you, Mayor. I do want to kind of follow up on that gentleman's comment about that $1 million. In terms of the Commerce Park, if I might just remind everybody what the newspaper said at the time when the last Economic Development Corporation, the Low Country Economic Alliance, was doing economic development. This is a quote about their dealings with the Commerce Park. It was during this time period that the county and the municipalities authorized taxpayer funds for a lemon that was sending so many warning signals no banker would touch it. As a result, they likely wasted more than $10 million on economic development at that time, including lavish salaries, consultants, speculative land, buildings and infrastructure, subsidies, tax gimmicks, and tucked away line items without much success. And as you all know, the Low Country Economic Alliance went the way of this spittoon. And then as the paper further commented, apparently having developed amnesia, Beaufort County and the municipalities in their wisdom agreed to substantially finance a new nonprofit, and that's where we come to the Beaufort Economic Development Corporation. And the complaints we hear today are so very similar to what was said in 2014, which was lavish salaries, consultants, speculative land, buildings, infrastructure, subsidies, tax gimmicks, and tucked away line items. So there's a lot of anger about money that the community feel is not being spent wisely by these types of organizations. But I want to bring up two things about this land deal that I think are so wrong, and you should be voting against it. Number one, the city of Beaufort, correct me if I'm wrong, is lousy with realtors, and I say that in the best possible way. Realtors, who I might add, only make money when they get a commission, and they also have to have a business license and they pay taxes. Why wasn't this bid out, this land sale bid out to a realtor that has a city of Beaufort license? I mean, I think that's a really fair question, because I don't know why you'd pass through, and it is a pass through, from the city to this third party that's not a realtor, that doesn't have a license and doesn't pay taxes? And number two, and correct me if I'm wrong, but do any of you know what this purchaser plans to do with the land? I mean, I haven't heard a thing about what they plan to do with it. Do any of you know? Because as far as I know, they haven't told anybody. I mean, are they planning to build, I don't know, a strip club? I mean, we don't know. And I probably shouldn't say that with 5 men up here. Let me change that. Are they planning to have like, well, maybe a young fascist and training leadership camp there? You don't know. How can you possibly make this deal anyway? When you don't even know what city-owned property would be used for? It might be completely against the wishes of this community and even this council. So I have to ask you to please use your best judgment here and vote against this absolute folly tonight. Thank you.
Ms. Decker, could you give us your address because for the record?
1006 Madrid Avenue, Port Royal. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is Alice Howard.
Good evening. I live at 1705 Riverside Drive in Beaufort, 29902. We live at 1705 Riverside Drives, and we've lived there since 1991 when we moved to Beaufort. And the house at 1703 Riverside Drive sold after extensive renovation in 2024. The neighborhood we live in is small, but it's part of the Mossy Oaks. It's known as River Acres. I went over and introduced myself to the young family and exchanged information, names, phone numbers, etc., as several other neighbors did too. In October of 2025, we noticed that although they were there sometimes at the house, there were other cars there too on different days. This pattern continued through December, although I thought maybe the husband was working out of town and the family was with him. In January of 2026, on a Saturday morning, there was a family playing basketball with Georgia Tax, and I went over to introduce myself and asked if they had bought the house. This is when I learned that this was a short-term rental, which explained all the other various cars, etc. I notified the city and the county, and the city sent a letter immediately. None of the other adjacent neighbors knew anything about it either, although they had also noticed the comings and goings. The property was listed at 4% for property taxes. And when I did some more research, this same family, same names, also own a house at Mink Point, which was at 4%. It is my understanding that the owner had not paid the business license fee for short-term rentals. But as of last week, the final inspection by the city has been carried out, and I appreciate that. Respectfully, we request that the city use a better system to get reports of short-term rentals or do a publicity campaign on the website or whatever other means are available. I am sure there are many more out there in the city of Beaufort. In the revised ordinance, this house is now grandfathered, unfortunately, and none of the neighbors knew about it. I'd like to request that adjacent owners be notified of a pending application or at minimum after approval of an application. With that application, please provide information on who to contact if there are issues, such as the manager or owner of the property and contacts at code enforcement. I think 6% of a neighborhood is way too high, especially when Mossy Oaks is a large area and Royal Oaks is a large area. Our house in particular is two doors down from the the town of Port Royal. And there are short-term rentals on West Vine and Battery Creek Road that are actually in the town of Port Royal, but this is not considered, and I don't know that that can even be fixed, but we could likely be surrounded at one time by short-term rentals. There is no excuse for not purchasing or knowing that a license is required. And it is also a safety issue for the people renting the house. Also, there's no excuse for only paying 4% on when they know they have rental property. Hotels are held to strict standards in the city of Beaufort and are a vital part of our business community. And in my opinion, what these short-term rentals are mini hotels. When we bought our house, I never would have thought we'd be living next door a mini hotel in our neighborhood. I attended the meeting on March 24th, 2026, and agree with several of the speakers. We do not want to be a city of weekly visitors with no sense of community. We were really looking forward to having neighbors with young children and not people who are there for just 2 to 4 days to go to graduation at Paris Island. Sincerely, Allison Jean Howard, 1705 Riverside Drive, Beaufort, South Carolina, 29902. And I provided a copy for all of them. Thank you.
Lila Meeks.
Well, I've never spoken here before,
Oh, well.
but now that I'm here and I realize how high you are, I just want to say hallelujah that 250 years ago, some Americans said, we don't like having a king, not even if it's King Philip I. What we like is we like everybody listening to one another and working out the problems. And that's why we all went to the polls and elected you in this place. And that's why we've all come tonight to make sure that you hear us and know what our thoughts are, because I know in America, those thoughts are important. Creating the character of a community, building a history, hammering out differences and finding solutions to problems together, firming up goals, establishing trust and friendships, bonding over social, cultural, and political gatherings takes generations. In the case of Beaufort, it has been going on since the 1500s, right, Dr. Roden? Now, he would tell you that everybody wasn't speaking the same language then, but it was a start. And it was an excellent start, because over these years, all manner of people, adventurers, scholars, homemakers, members of the military, mariners, teachers, retirees, farmers, fishermen, doctors and nurses, artists, laborers, artisans, and others from all parts of the U.S. and beyond have been drawn here, first by the Low Country's natural beauty, and later by the beauty and our welcoming community. The result has been a diverse population, staying put and also welcoming all manner of new folk with all manner of talents who have come here to work, play, grow a family, build a business, protect our country, or just enjoy retirement. Now it seems that the very people that we elect and then count on to protect our community are considering ending 400 years of community building by concluding it is more important for some property owners, perhaps 20%, to make a profit from their homes than for them to join us, perhaps 80%, in efforts to build a community. Whoever first voted for making short-term rentals possible in any area, Mossy Oaks, Bay Street, any area in Beaufort, made a horrid mistake. Now I have to find my place, sorry. Replacing neighbors with intermittent and random strangers is the beginning of the end for community building. The reason City Council and city planners have been looking at this policy during the past months, I believe, is because wherever it has been implemented, as we have heard very graphically tonight from certain neighbors, there have been unforeseen costs and predictable problems. So why would anybody be considering expanding those problems into new areas of the community rather than eliminating them from those who have the problems? Please stop and look around our community. And then at the world's communities, even large cities like Barcelona and Florence, small cities like High Point, North Carolina, they have repealed their short-term rental laws because of the damage being done to their communities. They have seen the errors of their ways and are now repealing laws that allow those rentals. Please do the same for Beaufort. It is time to repeal, not enact. Say no to STRs and save our beautiful community. And all of us down here will be so grateful that you did. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, that was my creative writing instructor at Beaufort, at USC Beaufort. That was my creative writing instructor.
And I hope you're listening to what I said. All right, it's 911 New Street.
Okay. Okay, next we have Felice Lamarca.
Gentlemen, 802 Godfrey Street in the Pigeon Point neighborhood. The only thing I'm going to say, follow up, that's a hard act to follow on the STR situation. You know, I'm quite in tune to it and serious about controlling it. In your, what you're about to look at, we're at second reading, I still don't understand why permitted STRs don't count towards the 6%. What this sounds like is that if you have a cap of 6%, permitted STRs operating prior to tonight are grandfathered. So does that mean we could have 12% or 20%? So I don't get that. And I would like that cleared up in writing, please. Okay. The real reason I'm up here is I don't like the EDC. I'll be very honest. I've been watching them and listening and going to county meetings, and I have yet to see one thing they've done that was good for any community. And I'm on a mission to defund them. I think every single municipality and city should say no. And what Mr. Trask said is absolutely true. If you don't have the talent and the employees in this city to manage the project, then we got a bigger problem than this. But what my research and hours spent in meetings has shown me is that you got a failed commerce park here in Beaufort. Nobody that I've talked to that's a citizen that's out here working is behind it. And everybody wants to know about our money. What's happening to our money? We can't fix waterfront. And you want to give $1 million of a $2.7 million sale to someone who's already proven he can't handle money. And when I say proven, I'm going to get in the trenches. What's that $1 million backdoor deal to the Open Land Trust to fund and develop property, which I didn't think they were in the business of, when county council denied it? This is not a good organization. You do not want to be associated with them, and you do not want to spend our money, our taxpayer money. Go fix the waterfront. Thank you.
Next is Ethan James.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Ethan James, 2698 Hanover Lane in Mossy Oaks. I'd like to reference Ms. Meeks, who recently mentioned that coming together to listen and working out problems. I'll tell you, I have a little bit of a problem here. I'm a Beaufort native. I'm a longtime real estate broker and an active investor here in our community. I'm here tonight regarding the proposed changes to short-term rental regulations, specifically how they impact properties currently on the city's vacant and abandoned structures list. I own a home at 1202 Green Street as an investment. It is a 0-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 570 square foot cottage built in 1880. The home is in severe disrepair, requires a full rehabilitation, and is on the city's vacant and abandoned structures list. I made this investment based on the current ordinance, which allows properties like mine to have an exception, those actively on the vacant and abandoned list to qualify for short-term rental use, even within the cap, to encourage rehabilitation of properties like this. I've heard that this home has been sitting vacant from neighbors for possibly 20, 30, I've heard even up to 50 years. The provision is not just policy, it is an incentive. It's what makes projects like this financially feasible. If the ordinance is changed as proposed, this incentive disappears. In my case, I cannot long-term rent the property without taking a huge financial loss. I cannot renovate it and resell it without taking a loss due to current construction costs. I can't renovate it and move into it, being only 600 square feet. My fiance would probably kill me. And I did not pursue this investment to get rich. I did pursue it as a lifelong Beaufortonian who wants to help preserve and personally own a piece of historic Beaufort. Without that pathway, the reality is simple. Projects like mine do not get done, at least not in a timely fashion. And when that happens, homes remain vacant, they continue to deteriorate, and the burden ultimately shifts back to the city and the community. I fully understand, especially after listening to everyone about the short-term rentals and the vote tonight and how they impact our community. However, I would strongly encourage council to consider taking time to evaluate situations like mine. I can assure you it will not be the only one. At a minimum, I'm asking that you carefully consider how changes to the short-term rental code will impact rehabilitation of abandoned historic properties and whether a targeted exception or pathways should remain in place for those willing to take on these challenging projects. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ethan. Okay, next we have Martha Spears.
Hello, I live at 1201 King Street. I have 10 townhouses beside me. We're on the bluff, or in the bluff area. And I'm concerned about the exception of HOAs in the short-term rental. There's a residence behind me that's short-term rental. My house and this house are the only two residents that live on the block. The others are in the townhouses. It's my understanding that a HOA there can allow 50% of those 10 to be short-term rentals. And I don't know how that impacts the cap. And so I am concerned that instead of having one or two, that the cap allows, or 3 or 6 or whatever the number is on the bluff, that I'm going to have 6 on my block. And I just want you to be aware of how HOAs might impact those caps. Thank you.
Thank you. Your next is John Tashin. Oh, there he is.
Hi there. I live at 1 Lawrence Street. I think I may live in one of the original short-term rentals. Our title home at the beginning of the 1900s was a bed and breakfast. Really through when Larry Rowland and his family was there operating it as a bed and breakfast. Don't blame Larry for short-term rentals. Really until the 1970s, Title Home was a place where people would come on their way down to Florida or points warmer in the south. They would come from the Northeast, some would stay. artists and authors lived there or stayed there. But a lot's changed in 100 years. Hotels have been built, they've created jobs. So I think we have to look contextually at short-term rentals and kind of a larger scheme of Beaufort and how we've evolved and where we're going. But when I'm listening to all this and I can't help but think, maybe we should let this happen. What a windfall for us. We could have big chill parties. I could have last minute funerals and a bunch of people from Michigan will stay over. I mean, what a creative windfall this could be for us. But at the end of the day, I know it's wrong for Title Home. I know it's wrong for our neighborhood. I know it's wrong for our community. I also know it was the deal. When I moved here, when I bought the house, I was told short-term rentals are not allowed. Every person who lives in the Point purchased and knows that's not the deal. So, I was seduced by Beaufort. It's its natural beauty, its history, its citizenship. My wife, who grew up here. I'm a real estate developer by trade. I spent my career working with cities and counties, talking to them about growth, about smart growth, about urban planning, and I try to explain to them that everything has a place. Everything has a reasonable place. The fact of the matter is, short-term rentals just don't belong in the Point for a reason. And I'll get to it, but I know you're all good men. It's my personal observation as someone who works with cities. Since I've been here, I've just never seen a city work harder to erode the very thing that attracts people to Beaufort. I've stood up here when they wanted to throw the historic Beaufort Foundation off the Historic Review Board. It's like a hospital saying, let's form a board, but we don't want any doctors. Let's not have anyone who knows anything about it. But then they welcome developers with open arms. It doesn't make much sense for the historic district. So 7 years ago, I moved from a city that contorted itself in the name of false equity. It changed its laws, it changed its zoning, and it lost its magic. I don't want to see that happen to Beaufort. People say this is about equity. It's not. I'm sorry, because not all neighborhoods are the same. And the Point is different. First, because we're a restricted neighborhood in terms of what we can build and how we can build it. No one endures the same zoning restrictions, Historic Review Board approvals that we have to. So if you're saying, you have to abide by all these restrictions, why can't this community decide on the restrictions that currently exist? No one endures the clip-clopping of horses and carriages, walking tours, golf cart tours, the things that fuel Beaufort. People come to Beaufort to be part of the Point. And I'm not saying that it deserves something different. I'm just saying it is different, and it's always been different. And the deal was that it was different. So I guess what I'd ask you is, because I know you all and I know you to be good men, exercise good government. Talk to your constituent neighborhoods. I don't think you can throw a blanket of legislation over a city because there are people who have made investments with the intention of short-term rentals. There are communities that need it for economic development. The Point simply doesn't. We can't grow. We're restricted in our growth. And I just think it's different. Thanks.
The next is TJ Belasco. Okay, how about, okay. I just saw Bishop Hathaway leaving. I didn't know you were part of that entourage.
TJ Belasco, 1402 Palmetto Street, just a stone's throw away. First of all, I want to thank you all for engaging in this conversation with so many people. I know it'll make for a long night, but thank you very much for listening. So A little bit of background first. I moved here a couple of years ago. I plan on calling this home until I die. But the town I moved from was a tourist town in the southernmost point in New Jersey. I lived in a little community just west of that, West Cape May. When I was first there, we were a vibrant community. I would say I knew 40 to 50 people on my block, had conversations with everyone, walked the dog, talked to people. When I left, I was lucky if I knew 6. They let it get out of hand and never had a chance to close the door. What that brought on was we once had a vibrant civic association that went away. Our school is now doing a study to see if they can even stay open. And the worst part was young adults and local graduates from the community, because of the increase in value for short-term rentals, couldn't afford to come back and live. So they were losing the lifeblood of that town. Now, from that point, I go to words of a very good friend of mine. He's a West Point grad, and he said one of their mantras was, don't complain unless you have a solution. So I have 3 areas I would like to see you consider as you work through this ordinance. Number 1, I'd like to see a very clear definition of owner-operated short-term rentals. And by that, I think you have a 3-hour radius, which I think is way too far. I think that an owner-operated should be living in Beaufort County. That way, if there's an issue, they can get here. It keeps things within that community. The other area to look at is density. That's the worst thing that can happen to losing a community, is when you see these short-term rentals turn into cluster homes. Because a few things happen. Number 1, most of them, especially if they're a home and not just an ADU, bring more cars than they're zoned to have, because people are coming from different areas. So all of a sudden you have 4 and 5 cars coming to a destination, and it absolutely destroys the integrity of the community. My next one, since it's baseball season, I'll say a 3-strike policy. If you have an infraction, the first one will be a warning. Let the owner know that something's happened. Second infraction would be a fine. And then a third infraction would be non-renewal of their short-term rental, because that would at least seize up the trouble that can be caused from some of these rentals in keeping a documentation of what's taking place. And last, I really think it would be a great idea to really look at caps, at saying we're going to do, I would say, like a 3% growth, or maybe cap it at 200 as they start to grandfather out and phase out. So thank you for listening. Thank you for having this discussion tonight.
Thank you very much. And last is Myra Belasco.
Good evening. Same last name, Belasco, same address, 1402 Palmetto Street. I have to say, although I did experience the same mess in my beautiful hometown of Cape May, where I grew up, I watched it be destroyed by short-term rentals, bachelorette parties, all of the entourage that goes with it. Despite all that, I'm not opposed to the idea of short-term rentals. I certainly understand that people need them financially. I appreciate the thought that's gone into the writing of this ordinance. I appreciate that you're letting all of us speak here tonight. I appreciate my 5 minutes. I will not go over. My concern is that in the time it takes for readings, revisions, more revisions, and passage of this ordinance, that it's possible that more short-term rentals can be approved. As you can hear, many of us feel the city already has enough short-term rentals, particularly certain neighborhoods, as you've heard. What I'm wondering is, in the meantime, if there's, a first reading, there's a second reading. If there's not, it's just going to continue to go on as more short-term rentals are approved. Can we put a moratorium on new applications while all of this is being hashed out? I say this because there are currently 4 new homes for sale in my neighborhood. They're literally in my backyard. I see people wandering around in my yard. There are 4 new homes, and if all of them were to become short-term rentals, I would be living next to an additional 4 short-term rentals. And if, as a previous speaker said, that Higginsonville, which is technically my little section of the woods there, well, no longer woods, If Higginsonville already has 15 to 20%, 4 more would certainly put us way over that. And I don't want to live next to that. I want to live in a community. I watched my own home where I grew up be destroyed by this. I moved here because I have a grandbaby. You know, despite all of that mess, I would have died in my house at the beach. Came here because I've got a grandbaby here. I'm a part of the community. I volunteer here. I know my neighbors. I want to enjoy being here for the rest of my life. I do not want 4 more people every new weekend right on top of me. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, that's all who signed up. I'll ask if there's anyone else who wishes to speak. Okay, come forward. You got it. Come on. This is Rob Cahill, for those who don't know. Already know.
Will be brief. Rob Cahill, 608 Water Street, next door in City Walk. 3 points. One, I think the essential question on the floor is what is in the best interest of the city of Beaufort? Again, what is in the best interest of the city of Beaufort? Since I spoke about that last month, I was criticized profusely about patronizing to the people on the point. And I said, you missed it all. No, I celebrate you again for being here, being organized, being eloquent, being succinct, clear, concise, and cogent. Everyone has the opportunity to do that, and that's part of the beauty which attracted me. And using different language, I'm leaving here in a box when my days are over. One. Second, we don't need to solve this problem in a vacuum. There are things happening across the country, even in the world, about short-term rentals. And the woman that talked about High Point, oh man, yeah, that sparked the idea, which is number 3. I would strongly consider and suggest you cease STRs entirely. Provided how you find a way to make it legally defensible. I have compassion for the person that came and did it. That's true. Yeah, I just have compassion. We had 16 speakers. 3 talked about the economic development. So 13 with the math. I've not seen anybody come up here and defend them. I don't think you can find anybody that's going to stand up in a public hearing and defend them. They have no, well, here's what they have in their notes, a blank piece of paper. It's indefensible, I think. So I would not just take a little thing to cap them at X or Y or Z. I would not have grandfathers. I would cease them entirely as soon as it's legally defensible. Thank you for listening.
Okay, moving on the agenda. That'll do it for that. We'll have a meeting agenda approval. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and a second.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we move item under new old business item D to E.
Okay, do I have a second? I'll second that. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Did you go aye on that? What we're doing is we're putting it STRs last under old business so we can spend some time on it. Try to get these other items out of the way. Is that agreeable with everyone? Okay. All right, so that motion passes. I guess going back to the original, we'll approve the agenda as is, okay. Next are proclamations. We have a character education proclamation for Rochelle Valdez Cruz from Beaufort High School.
Move accept.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Ms. Valdez here?
Whereas the character education movement reinforces the social, emotional, and ethical development of students, and character education provides long-term solutions to moral, ethical, and academic issues that are of growing concern to our society and our schools. The 11 principles of effective character education include promoting core ethical and performance values, teaching students to understand, care about, and act upon the core ethical and performance values, encompassing all aspects of the school culture, fostering a caring school community, providing opportunities for moral action, supporting academic achievement, developing intrinsic motivation, including whole staff involvement, requiring positive leadership of staff and students, and involving parents and community members, and assessing the results and striving to improve upon those results. Whereas the purpose of Carriage Education Program is to integrate good school character traits into the environment as well as the entire community. And each school's counselor identifies a list of character words and definitions deemed important regardless of the person's political leanings, race, gender, or religious convictions. Those words are friendship, kindness, acceptance, courage, tolerance, respect, gratitude, compassion, citizenship, perseverance, honesty, integrity, self-control, forgiveness, responsibility, and cooperation. Whereas Rochelle Valdez Cruz was selected as the winner of Beaufort High School as the Student of the Month. Now therefore, the City Council of the City of Beaufort hereby proclaim February 2026 as Rochelle Valdez Cruz as Beaufort High School Student of the Month. City of Beaufort thereby pronounces honesty and integrity as the word of the month for February and applauds Rochelle Valdez Cruz, the Beaufort County School District, the Beaufort High School, for their work, and specifically honors Rochelle Valdez Cruz as Beaufort High School Student of the Month. Congratulations.
I would just like to thank you all for recognizing me. I would like to say, though, I'm not the only student at my school who would deserve something like this. There are many other students who do just as much and are just as kind and participate in improving our community just as much as I do. They go to countless events in the city of Beaufort and help do things. They do a lot of community service and they host events. So just for me, I would say this is not just an award for me, but for everyone from my school who does the same.
Thank you. Okay, next we have a proclamation proclaiming April 2026 as Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month.
Move accept.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye. Whereas South Carolina's future prosperity is dependent upon nurturing a healthy development of 1.1 million children currently residing in diverse communities across the state. Our children deserve to have the safe, stable, nurturing homes and communities they need to foster a healthy growth and development. In fiscal year 2025, there were 12,269 documented children with substantiated maltreatment in South Carolina. And in fiscal year 2025, Hopeful Horizons conducted 385 forensic interviews for cases of alleged child abuse and neglect, while the Child Abuse Prevention Association provided 13,133 days of care for 90 foster children. Whereas child abuse is a public health issue with serious societal consequences, as data shows, the link between the abuse and neglect of children and a wide range of costly medical, emotional, psychological, and behavioral problems into adulthood. Preventing child abuse and neglect must be a priority that requires individuals, families, youth-serving organizations, faith-based groups, businesses, government agencies, and everyone that makes up the community to support the physical, emotional, and educational development of all children and their families. Whereas effective child abuse prevention exists in communities that provide parents with the social support, knowledge of parenting and child development, and concrete resources they need to cope with the stress and nurture their children, help to ensure that all children can grow to their full potential. Now, therefore, let it be resolved, the City of Beaufort, South Carolina, in conjunction with Hopeful Horizons, Child Abuse Prevention Association, CAPA, and support service organizations around the state, designate the month of April as Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month, while urging all citizens to dedicate themselves to protect quality of life for every child. Congratulations. We have a second proclamation related to this, and you can both stay for that. We just have to pass it real quick, so stand right there. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's only for
Okay, do I have a motion to accept the proclamation proclaiming April 2026 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Whereas Sexual Assault Awareness Month calls attention to the fact that sexual violence is a widespread problem and has health implications for every person in the city of Beaufort and our surrounding community. Whereas rape, sexual assault, and sexual harassment impacts our communities is seen by statistics indicating that 1 in 5 women and 1 in 10 children will experience sexual abuse in their lifetime. Hopeful Horizons, our local child advocacy, domestic violence, and rape crisis organization, served 1,367 primary victims in 2025. And Hopeful Horizons urged every person to speak out against harmful attitudes and actions that lead to violence. All people are encouraged to report all types of violence in the community to make it safer, and prevention of sexual violence is possible. Therefore, we must work together to increase awareness and involve all members of the community in these efforts, as well as help survivors connect with services. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the City of Beaufort, South Carolina, in conjunction with Hopeful Horizons, designates the month of April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Signed this 14th day of April, 2026, Mayor Cromer. Thank you.
So on behalf of Kappa and Hopeful Horizons, I would like to thank you for recognizing April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month and Child Abuse Prevention Month. So how can we as citizens and elected officials promote child abuse prevention and sexual assault awareness? Well, by being here tonight, you're educating yourselves because you cannot solve a problem that you don't acknowledge. Believe survivors, do not tolerate abuse, sexual aggressive language, or behaviors. Let survivors know they are believed and encourage survivors to report abuse and encourage them to get help. Your police department is very approachable, and Hopeful Horizons is also there to help. So that's how you can help promote sexual assault awareness and child abuse prevention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rose.
So next, we have a proclamation proclaiming April 2026 as Fair Housing Month.
Move accept.
Second.
Yeah, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, ayes have it. We don't need to read this because no one's here. This is something for the city itself, so we'll just save that for you, Tracy. Okay, next we have a public hearing. This is on Calhoun Streetscape Improvements Project Closeout. City Manager, any comments you wish to make on that?
No, we have a representative from the LCOG here who will conduct that public hearing, Mayor.
All right, appreciate that.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Tiffany Dantzler. I'm a Community and Economic Development Specialist with the Low Country Council of Governments. Tonight, we're talking about the Calhoun Streetscape Project, which was CDBG number CE 21002. The city of Beaufort received, the city of Beaufort received $750,000 in CDBG funds to make streetscape improvements to Calhoun Street. The local match on this project was $2,017,931. The city of Beaufort has reallocated the resources to more pressing projects, making this project no longer financially feasible. As a result, this grant is being terminated.
Okay, thank you. What I'm going to do is open this to public hearing. If anyone wishes to speak on this, can come speak. If not, I'll close the meeting after that. So this public hearing is open. Anyone wish to speak to this project? Okay, seeing none, this public hearing is closed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next, we'll move on to minutes. Approval of the regular meeting of March 10th, 2026.
So move approval of the March 10th meeting minutes.
Okay, okay, I have a motion and a second. Any changes? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, next, the work session minutes of March 24, 2026.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any changes? Okay, hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now to old business. This is on an ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute a purchase and sale agreement between the city of Beaufort, South Carolina and Clarendon Farms LLC for the sale of approximately 31.79 acres located at 90 Shork Road, tax parcel R120020000, 02690000, and other matters related thereto. This is second reading. I have to recuse myself as I am a member of the board and also a member of council, so I'm going to recuse myself and turn the gavel over to Mike McPhee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a presentation on the purchase agreement from,
We need a motion first.
we need a motion, yeah. We have a
Make motion to approve.
Second, or you can second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Keep me in line, guys.
Good evening, members of council. This is second reading for the approval of a purchase agreement for the sale of 31.79 acres located at 90 Shork Road in our Commerce Park. The terms of the purchase agreement are a purchase price of $2.271 million, earnest money deposit of $65,000, a 45-day inspection period, the standard due diligence rights, closing 15 days after expiration of the inspection period, allocation of closing costs consistent with customary commercial practice, and limited remedies in the event of default. Again, this is second reading, so you are familiar with this particular item. I will say that on first reading, which was held on March 10th, 2026, there was a motion that upon second reading, specific language be included in the purchase agreement or as an exhibit to it that details the designated use of funds totaling $1 million in excess of the $40,000 per acre purchase price for the property. To satisfy this motion, a separate agreement between the City of Beaufort and the Beaufort County Economic Development Corporation is presented for consideration as an exhibit to a resolution that is a separate agenda item that is under new business in tonight's meeting. I believe we have Mr. O'Toole and Ms. Brunson here from the Beaufort County Economic Development Corporation. If you have any questions that any of us can answer for you, we'd be happy to do that.
I have a question. And it's probably for Mr. O'Toole. How, if in any way, does the $1 million that has been talked about in the, pardon me, in the public comments affect the sale of this land?
The ultimate use of the $1 million would be council's decision on what you decide to do with it. What we have done since consulting council on this June 10th of 2025 is negotiated the deal that you have before you. So in this portion of the agenda, we are showing you, we've gotten you the 40,000 per acre, which is 3.6 times what you paid for the land. We also have the $1 million, which now brings the multiple up to 6.5 of what you paid for the land. And if you add the use of the borrow pit, you'd be up at 8.22 of what you paid for the land. What you decide to do with the $1 million, I know we spoke on March 10th, and you have a lot of different pressures. What the council decides to do with the proceeds is your decision. As your agent, we were contacted, and I think this will answer some of the questions that were raised. We were contacted spring of last year, and as your representative, we bring that offer to you. But to answer your question, the $1 million is still the $1 million above the purchase price is really in your purview, what you decide to do with it. I will say that when this purchaser contacted us, I said, city's really looking for a return on investment in the park, and ultimately you're looking for grand list growth. But when I was at that June 10th meeting, there was also a feeling in the community, well, let's see some return on investment. So I believe when council advised us to proceed, you recognize that getting the purchase price plus the $1 million would help you move other projects forward in the Commerce Park where development was stalled. But succinctly, the decision on what to do with the proceeds is in council's hands, and we work at your direction.
So as a follow-up question, if council decides that we want to spend that money elsewhere other than reinvesting it in Commerce Park, that's at our discretion.
It absolutely is. I'll add this little caveat that when we negotiated this, we told council what we were looking to accomplish by the sale of the land, and that might move another spec building forward. The last building that was called the spec is no longer a spec. It's a fully occupied. It employs, there are 2 employers that split that building. So we have been proceeding towards getting another spec building built in the park. But if council decided not to do that, we would have to strike other deals in the park. And later on in the agenda, we have lot K, D, and B, where we have people coming forward with plans to develop industrial business space in the Commerce Park. So it's your decision. This sale is not negated because you decide to do something different with the $1 million.
So this just one last question. So before any of that money is spent, BCEDC would have to get our approval.
Correct, yes, yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Everything's been answered for me.
I have a comment, not necessarily a question. First, I want to thank Scott and John as well for providing the resolution that details the expenditure of the $1 million. I think that's important, and it was missing in the first reading to at least provide clarity to the public on what the intended purpose of those funds are. I will say that in the resolution here, I didn't see any mention of a spec building. It basically was that the $1 million could be used for site development, grading, and that's in the Commerce Park. But I have concerns over some of the language in that resolution as well, because it provides up to 15 years of a term agreement, and I don't feel comfortable with that. But my first concern, and I was actually hoping that Ben would be here tonight, and he's not, was found on page 134 of our packet, section 9.11, which says, no third-party beneficiary. The provisions of this agreement and of the documents to be executed and delivered at closing are and will be for the benefit of seller and purchaser only, and are not for the benefit of any third party, or accordingly, no third party shall have the right to enforce the provisions of this agreement or of the documents to be executed and delivered. One of those documents is Exhibit D. There is also a chance that I am not interpreting that language correctly, and I understand that, which is why I was hoping to get some clarification from legal. Be that as it may, it read to me initially there was a deal between 2 parties, the seller, which would be the city, and the purchaser, which would be Clarendon, and no room for a third party there. Aside from that, I still am unresolved in my broader concern. Tonight, we're proposing to allocate $1 million, or roughly 44% of the proceeds from the sale of a public asset to a third-party organization. The property is one that the city has already made significant investment in over the years, and the return that we are seeing from a sale well above market value could be an opportunity for us to redirect funding towards other priorities that we have across the city. Even if this arrangement is the will of council tonight, I struggle with the structure of the agreement. As I mentioned, the 15-year term would allow for the Economic Development Corporation to benefit from any interest earned on those funds while we as a city are simultaneously discussing the potential for a property tax or not property tax, but tax increase for the second year now. And so I think that for us, you know, it's a really good deal that's negotiated here, even though I have some heartburn about selling property that has long been designated as commerce in the development of businesses and diversifying our economy, to all of a sudden uproot that and say, well, we'll sell it off to Clarendon for, we don't even really know what. The assumption would be conservation or preservation, but there's been no language anywhere that I have seen in any of our documents that says that that's what the intended use is. Maybe it could become an expansion of a clean burn or a pilot program for composting or a number of things, and we just have no idea. So for me, I have a little bit of heartburn risking the unknown there, but I could support getting some return on investment because we're selling the property so much more than market value. I also think, though, that transparency has to be a part of this discussion. As noted in the Island Packet report from December 31st of 25, the Economic Development Corporation has recently argued in court that it's not a public body under South Carolina's FOIA, stating specifically no facts sufficient to support a conclusion that the Beaufort County Economic Development Corporation is or was at any relevant time a public body. As that term is defined in FOIA, the argument effectively asserts that the Economic Development Corporation is not subject to South Carolina's Freedom of Information Act public records disclosure requirements because FOIA only applies to public bodies, which, as a reminder, the definition is organizations supported in whole or in part by public taxpayer funds. The position raises a reasonable concern about oversight when we are committing this level of public funding. So for those reasons, unfortunately, while I reluctantly support the sale of Clarendon, the questions surrounding transparency, the lack of supporting evidence regarding a letter of intent for how Clarendon intends to use the 31.79 acres, and no metrics that I can find to govern the grant funding leave me unable to support the deal, so I will be a no vote.
Any other comments?
Just for clarification, I don't want to get into back and forth, but if we have, if the Economic Development Corp cannot use this money without city's approval, how can it be assumed that it's going to be used for the benefit of the purchaser of the land? I just don't see how that connects. If I'm understanding what one of your concerns, Josh, that the money will, and interest or whatever accrues from it, would be used for the benefit of the purchaser. If I understood John's comment that we city has final say on that money, and we could use it for something other than in the park if we so choose. So to me, that negates us being city council, city of Beaufort, losing control of that money. They have to get approval from us before it can be used for anything other than what we may approve it for.
No,
Am I confused on that?
I think maybe the resolution is that this $1 million, if donated to Economic Development Corporation tonight, will sit in a separate fund that they have. So that would mean that my understanding is that any interest that is born from those funds would not be the city's. It would be either in that fund that is managed by the Economic Development Corporation and perhaps used for site development, grading, or improvements in the Commerce Park, but I don't see any language that protects or even mentions any interest that may come from those funds. And the reality is that resolution is potentially up to a 10-year term. So it doesn't mention any spec building or developer who may be on the horizon interested in building something in the park. It could be that through the 8-month due diligence period, that developer walks away and then the $1 million sits in account for up to 15 years, gaining interest. And sure, we may have some liberty to say we want that money back to recommit it. I don't know. I didn't see anything in there for that, but it's a concern that I have.
John or Scott, do you guys have any comments one way or the other on this? It would be helpful if Ben were here.
No, I mean, we haven't gotten to the part of looking at the resolution yet, but certainly it is connected to this action as well. I have not heard anything that's untrue about the resolution. Maybe Mr. O'Toole can speak toward the interest would be born out of the $1 million, but do you have any?
Just two comments. One on the litigation. That is our insurance company's position on freedom of information. It's our position that we are open and have responded. We've never to date charged anyone for freedom of information and met them. There was a confusion that is in the court on a particular item that was requested without getting into litigation. The language that you have in the resolution, this sale is not, it doesn't have to be tied to that resolution. Tonight, you could approve the sale, be the beneficiary of the sale, and still fine tune the resolution so that your concerns can be addressed. But keep in mind that everything the corporation has done for 8.5 years, and this transaction as well, we've sought city council's direction and have moved in the direction that we were ordered to move. We're not, this particular resolution was initially drafted by our lawyer and then redrafted by your lawyer. So we gave a starting point, but it was authored by your counsel. But if it needs to be fine-tuned, I like what the one gentleman said, is that you shouldn't just critique, you should improve. And so if the resolution needs to be improved to get council comfortable with the direction, we'll do it. But keep in mind, since June 10th last year, we have met, and we have asked for your direction, and we have followed it, and we'll continue to follow what council and staff direct us to do.
So the most directed question that I can ask is that the sale of the property with reference to this, the resolution does not have to be passed by us tonight if we pass the sale of the property.
Correct.
That's correct, yeah.
And I don't know that I can put my finger on it right now, but in the main contract, I remember seeing that the $1 million was a contingency to the sale. So I'm not sure how the two could be separated.
I combed through that after our discussion today, and I could not find anything in the
Okay.
purchase agreement that indicated the purchase agreement execution was dependent upon the $1 million. In fact,
Okay.
there's no mention of the $1 million anywhere in the purchase agreement.
It
So
was
that
the
could be
borrow,
a
was it the borrow
standalone
pit?
action. The borrow pit is, yes.
Okay.
Borrow pit, which is Exhibit D, is a conditional requirement of execution of the agreement.
Which, and that's another point that we didn't discuss, but I guess I'm not sure that when I read that exhibit, it is an agreement specifically between the Economic Development Corporation and Clarendon. And I'll be honest, if we vote in favor of selling the property to Clarendon, which again, my heartburn comes from having no knowledge of what they intend to do with the property at all, even after requesting that last time. But regardless from that, I just don't know why the city is a part of, in any way, the agreement between Economic Development Corporation and Clarendon for that borrow pit. It would almost be like if I had a house and I'm selling my house to you, Mike, and you decide that after you buy the house, you want to let your best friend sleep on the porch for a month, that's on you. I mean, if you want to do that, then fine. But in this case, I'm not sure why we're seeing the arrangement between Economic Development Corporation and in Clarendon. If they buy it and they want to do that and they're okay with, the two parcels being used as a borrow pit, then that's on them. They own the property at that point. But what is our involvement in that portion of the deal?
We benefit from the borrow pit because it's to be used in the Commerce Park on our property.
But we could benefit from that either way. It doesn't matter, but we're not a part of that.
If we
We're
don't
not a
sell
part
it,
of that deal at all. That's just it is just between Clarendon and Economic Development Corporation, and it can be terminated at Economic Development Corporation's will with a 30 days notice. And we have no say on whether or not that happens or whether it doesn't. If they dissolve, that license does not revert back to the city. It's dissolved. We are not a part of that arrangement.
I can speak to one of the questions that was raised with regard to what the intent of the use of the property is by Clarendon. They did provide a letter, albeit unsigned, so that's not in your packet. But they did provide a letter stating they intended to use that as a conservation property, and they do not intend to develop it.
One thing too, there's only very small percentage of that would even be able to put development on, isn't it? Most of it is wetland or pond, I believe.
There would be limitations that could go on these parcels. One is due to your own zoning codes. So it would follow all of the uses. Somebody mentioned a commercial establishment for men. That would not be allowed in the Commerce Park following your planning codes. Keep in mind too, because of its relationship to the ACU zone, there are also prohibitions on what can be built underneath it due to that. I will say on the borrow pit, again, you're in the driver's seat. We discussed this throughout the process with the council that we could manage it. We could keep some of the liability away from the city. But if the city wanted to manage the borrow pit or be in that place, we would assign that to you. That's not a deal breaker either.
John, before you sit down, so regarding the interest on the property, given that we're in the driver's seat, would it be safe to assume that if we were to get into some sort of litigation on regards to who would which would the interest accrue to, that it would accrue to the city? Would that be a logical assumption?
Again, you can determine how you want that relationship to go. Yes, that would be an easy thing for you to opt to choose to be the beneficiary of the earned interest.
And I know that it's not always easy with so many different moving parts, but the fact that we're here at second reading and that's something that hasn't already been ironed out leads me to believe that this is probably something that just needs to be postponed until we can get those details worked out. Because if we pass this with a second reading tonight, then it's going to be very hard to go back and figure out all of those nuances that should have been part of the discussion previously.
Just say this, nothing's really been difficult in our relationship. If you ask for something, generally, we've responded. I can't think of one thing we didn't respond to. And we'll continue to work with you at whatever pace you decide to.
Okay. The will of council. All in favor of the purchase signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, sirs.
Correct.
And tell the mayor he can return.
Wake him up.
You're in charge of figuring out what's next, since you keep moving things.
Okay. All right, let's see, we're on B. Okay. Next item on the agenda is an ordinance to amend Part 9, Chapter 1, Section 9-1008, loud and unseemly noise of the City of Beaufort Code of Ordinances. This is second and final reading.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to propose tabling this for a future session,
Okay, work session.
to a work session and for follow-up for second reading.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Thank
motion
you.
passes.
Actually,
Okay,
a postpone, sorry.
yeah, postpone. We're
used the
going to
wrong
postpone
term.
it to discuss it further.
Mayor and
Um,
council, just for a point of clarification for staff direction, is this postponed to a date certain or postponed indefinitely at this point?
No, I'd like to postpone for an upcoming work session.
Okay, so you would like to discuss it at a work session and then reschedule it for a subsequent council meeting?
That is
Correct.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next is an ordinance to amend chapters 2 and 3 of Part 6 of the City Code of Ordinances to revise sections relating to weeds, litter, trash, and other matters related thereto. This is second and final reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Kurt, do you want to let the public know what this is about?
Sure. This is a ordinance to basically amend to allow us a few more tools in our toolbox for the kind of unsightly properties in the town, to allow you to basically put charges to correct or cure the properties on their tax bill instead of going through like a foreclosure type of action, which we found is to be very difficult. So the hope is this would help us gain a lot more compliance, especially with some of these problem properties.
Okay. Any discussion from council?
I'm going to vote yes on it, but I just want to ask, is there a plan to educate the public on this amendment or this change to an additional financial burden on their property should they not?
Sure. We have identified all of the properties I think that right now are, we considered code enforcement issues or have some violations. And we will give them all a warning, both by communication, like email, phone call, but also by like a little sticker that we'll put on their door hanger essentially on their property as well. So, yes, and we'll give them ample time. We were talking about at least 30 days before we'll start giving them a warning. So we're going to give them pre-notice of this, and then we'll start with a warning. And that warning is usually going to be at least 2 weeks, and then we'll start kind of the violation.
Is this going to be by some sort of certified mail to make?
We could do it by certified mail if you'd prefer, sure.
Because one of the things I know that happens with county taxes is, it trying to ensure that it gets to the person that it should get to. Or if it doesn't, a way of documenting that the attempt
Yes.
was made.
It's definitely done when we get to an actual warning, so we could do that ahead of time with this. I think that's fine.
And I thought that was already in here. The city may give notice by personal service or U.S. mail, certified mail return receipt. So
Sure, it's in there for when we actually do the warning. I was just talking about the
beforehand.
the communication beforehand. We were going to give everybody like a grace period, a warning grace period.
And I think that ought to go out in our regular, normal news push out, if you
Okay.
will.
Sure.
Okay.
I just have one small change, and it's grammar related, but Exhibit B, Chapter 3, Litter and Trash, Section 6-3001, duty of the owner or occupant on premise. The second sentence in that paragraph says, any trash or waste material accumulating upon any premise in the town in violation of any provisions of this section is hereby declared to be a nuisance and detriments to the health, safety, cleanliness, and comfort of the inhabitants of the city. And the town should be changed to city. So I would make a motion to amend that sentence, any trash or waste material accumulating upon any premises in the city. And again, that is under Section 6-3001, duty of the owner or occupant on premise.
Do I have a second to that amendment? I'll make it.
Found it.
Okay, all in favor?
It is on page 230 of your packet, the first paragraph.
Under the duty of owner and occupant of premises.
And what are you amending?
I'm amending town to city.
Oh,
From a Scribner area, really.
So can we just do that as a Scrivener error, or do we have to go through and amend it? Yes, since it's an ordinance, we have to go ahead and amend it, so. All in favor of this amendment, signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, going back to the original amendment, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, motion passes. Okay, now an ordinance to amend the City of Beaufort Ordinance 2025/13 regarding the fiscal year 2025-26 City of Beaufort budget to provide for the revenue and expenditures of Parks and Tourism Fund and Capital Projects Fund and amend Freedom of Information Act fee schedule. This is second and final reading.
so moved.
Second?
The motion is second. Alan, you want to?
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. The city sustained significant damage to the downtown Marina Day Dock facilities during Hurricane Helene, resulting in the need for reconstruction and resilience improvements. The city has identified the Parks and Tourism Fund as appropriate interim funding source for the Day Dock project until such time as FEMA funds are obligated and received for the project. And upon obligation of FEMA funds, the city intends to reimburse the Parks and Tourism Fund for all eligible project expenses. The project is $286,125. Budget includes $21,125 for engineering costs and $265,000 for construction costs. And also part of this ordinance includes a revision to the FOIA fee schedule to, and that includes adoption of a $20 flat hourly staff rate for time spent fulfilling FOIA requests. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions from council? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, ordinance passes. Now up to D, an ordinance to amend Part 7 of the Code of Ordinance of the City of Beaufort, South Carolina, and Section 3.6.2.C.2 of the Beaufort Development Code to adopt provisions regarding short-term rentals. This is second and final reading.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. I'm going to entertain any discussion. Kurt, do you want to come back and kind of review where we are on this before we discuss it?
Sure, I think at first reading, it's a little different room there, so this has been a very evolving project. I think, as you know, there's been 8 public meetings or work sessions, planning commissions, planning work sessions, city council meetings. And I think each time it's evolved, the ordinance has evolved. And the purpose of the ordinance, I think, that's been stated, I think, earlier by the residents was to better regulate short-term rentals, to bring a better balance than the current code offers. I think the first part of doing that was to move it from the development code, which is a land use, a property right, which is, as we were talking about in the last thing, a little harder to enforce, and moving it to a new section of the ordinance, essentially as a business license. And so the first thing that you're doing is you're basically taking it out of the development code and putting it into its own section of the municipal code as essentially as a business license, as a permit unto itself. And the thought with doing that is it would be easier to regulate and easier to enforce. So that's the first thing you're doing, and that necessitated the revision to the development code, and that required the recommendation from the Planning Commission. Now, the Planning Commission agreed on removing it from the development code, except for the fact that it's just allowed in those underlying zoning districts. But they did recommend, and that's part of their official recommendation, that it be owner occupied only. So everything else would be removed, would be owner occupied only. They kept the point exemption in that recommendation, that official recommendation from the Planning Commission. So from there, we went to first reading, and again, each reading, I think it kind of changed. And again, the purpose, sorry about that. The purpose was to better regulate that, and a lot of reverb, sorry. We'll wait. Hopefully that's a little better. But firstly, it was to remove many of the exemptions in the current ordinance that was adopted in 2017. So there was kind of an owner occupied exemption counting against the cap. There was, you could do multiple short-term rentals on a lot. So those were removed. The second thing we did is we looked at the spacing, the distance requirement or clustering, if you will. We looked at other communities around the country and we decided on a 300-foot kind of distance requirement. So if you're going to have the mayor was going to have a short-term rental and I wanted to build or permit a short-term rental, if I was within 300 feet and I applied today of the mayor's house or mayor's short-term rental, I'm not saying you have one, but that would be prohibited. And the idea is that that would kind of produce a healthier community, right? You wouldn't have so many short-term rentals on a block. That was the goal of that. So that was one of the major changes of this code, along with removing those exemptions. Also, that some changes to the code that you have before you today, which is again standalone code, was to really beef up the requirements of the owner, both that they have to provide a lot of documentation, who to contact. That was all added. Also, that was kind of added as enforcement was definitely increased. Other things that were added were we had an investor and owner occupied kind of differentiation. I think one of the amendments tonight was to kind of the original, I think at first reading was to say you couldn't do an ADU unless you were an owner occupied short-term rental. And I think there was an amendment to kind of change that as referenced before. And so there were 6 amendments that I guess I'll speak on, but I just want to get to the original, let's go through the original ordinance that you went first reading on and all the changes from the last current code. Trying to think what else. Basically that you did a waiting list essentially. So there's been some inconsistencies of how these have been applied for and permitted. And so essentially now there's a waiting list. So if, let's say I was waiting, maybe for one to open up and I'm within 300 feet or my neighborhood's capped out, I would pay and I go on a waiting list. Other things that were changed is it's now basically an annual permit that goes as an addendum to the business license. So when you update your business license every year, there'll be an addendum to it that'll have a bunch of information about the short-term rental. And it'll basically allow the city, if you have to notarize that or whatever, but that if you don't comply, then the city can do a follow-up inspection immediately. So those were kind of all of the major changes. And then there was the 6th Amendment. So I think from previous discussions, we were trying to preserve the rights of some of the existing short-term rentals. And I think there was some concern that that would go over a 6% cap. So that's been removed as per the amendment. So, essentially if, I'm trying to think of, I guess Pigeon Point, which is over the cap. The way the first reading was presented is that anything that was currently permitted, even if it was over the 6%, would essentially not count. And so I think you decided to let's remove that. All those grandfathered properties will count towards the 6% cap. So that's the first thing. Then there was I think the point exemption, which I don't know that I need to talk about in detail. I think that's been talked about a lot. There was also as I mentioned, the ADU change is that there was a desire, I think, the amendment to maybe allow that, the ADU should be allowed for an investor rental as well as an owner rental. So that was removed. There was a special exception change, which I think you should talk about because, from a zoning perspective, you're removing it from the zoning code, how you want to do some kind of hearing or basically a special exception and a different kind of board. I mean, it could be the city council actually, to allow in specific circumstances and under conditions an additional short-term rental on a property. That was an amendment. There was also kind of a concern to clean up that basically by transfer by deed under the statute, there was a concern that a corporation could basically transfer to another corporation or something of that nature. And Ben's not here. He was supposed to, basically revise that, but I think if you were to amend this, you could have him revise that language. And then just some kind of, you wanted to go back to the 3-strike rule. And again, Ben was going to revise that, but I think he's been on vacation for a little bit. So those were the amendments I think you voted on at second hearing. So hopefully that was a good overview of all the changes. Again, it's been evolving each meeting. I think you've been hearing the concerns of everyone, and yeah, I'll stop now. So.
Okay, I'm going to open it up for discussion. Anyone have some?
I've got some
comments?
questions for Kurt real quickly.
Okay.
Off the top of my head, do you know approximately how many there are in the Old Commons and Northwest Quadrant? Ballpark
Top of my
figure,
head.
just ballpark.
I think the Northwest Quadrant had like 37 or 38. I know we had our GIS analysts do maps for each
Yeah, that,
one recently,
I was
but I
trying to
can't
find it.
remember the number.
Okay, I was trying
There's 91 in the entire historic district, if that helps.
and how many?
There's 91 in the entire historic district.
91? Okay, and how many are there total?
255.
250. 250, okay. And there's what, about 5,700, 5,800 rooftops? Somewhere around
Yeah,
there?
a little
All
over
right.
6, yeah, right.
Okay,
How many?
A little over 6,000.
oh, 6,000, okay. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Anyone want to comment? Make some,
I'm a little, I guess Ben's been on a long vacation. From March 10th to now, we don't have clarification on whether or not we can have a 3-strike policy, which I know that this.
Oh,
council-
you definitely can. He just needed to write it.
Gotcha. And then I was looking at the special exception clause, and I know that there was, he kind of zeroed in on ZBOA not being able to rule on business license and short-term rentals in this case, and not sure I agree with that, but regardless, I think that it would have been appropriate to identify a path forward by which we could have an exception, because there was a reason and justification for why we introduced that clause. And now we've kind of at a position of, well, what do we do? Do we make it come before city council? Is it something that staff reviews with specific criteria that needs to be met in order for that exception? But I feel like we're no further on either one of those two things, which were pretty substantial questions that we had and needed clarification on as council. So that's unfortunate, because I wouldn't want to, move too far and then have to come back and revisit that, but we always could. And I know there's other points of this ordinance that we want to probably discuss and make comment on, but I just wanted to get that out initially, because I did feel like it was important for us to get clarification on those two things, which we
Yeah.
do not have.
and I had some questions of Ben as well, and I haven't heard back from him, dealing with some of this as well. So I don't know, as you said, whether we can come back and address those later. But I would like to get this issue kind of moved along, because we've been dealing with it for quite a while. And personally, for me, this whole thing's about balance. With me, these short-term rentals, we need to have reasonable limits, to protect our neighborhoods. And as I mentioned before, we were overwhelmed. I think the figure was what, 42% growth in 3 years or something? That's a lot to put on the neighbors. And, personally for me, I know we're going to have to probably grandfather existing STRs, because there's legal issues there, taking, I guess. But I'm in favor of a citywide cap to control overall growth. What that number is, I don't know, but 150, 200. I'm also in favor of a neighborhood percentage cap to prevent over concentration in any one neighborhood. Whether we do that across the board, whatever, 3% sounds good to me. And also the distance requirements, 300 feet to prevent clustering. So I think those all together help do that. Maybe just the neighborhood percentage caps and the distance requirements will do that as well to bring them down.
It would.
It will be a while, because you got 250 or 60 of these things. And they're not going to turn over anytime soon. So those are my 2 cents worth. If anyone else want to?
Mitch has got.
Mitch?
Yeah, I'd like to go ahead and weigh in on this. Yeah, it's very obvious that STRs do not contribute to spirit of neighborhood. Um, whatever the intent was originally, it has kind of become a situation where we have folks who are not real investors in the neighborhood coming in to have some fun and leave with sometimes a lot of chaos behind them. So anything that we could do that would slow down short-term rentals without unnecessarily burdening or creating a hardship for those who already have short-term rentals, I would definitely not be in favor of, say, okay, whatever date, year from now, all short-term rentals go away. I think that would just, in my opinion, may be a challenge that we'll lose in court, but to me personally, I feel unfair. But if we could do something to stop the growth essentially, without exemptions for any particular neighborhood, I think everyone knows where I stand on that. But something that applies to the city overall where we don't create a division. You may say certain neighborhoods that are special because they're different. That sounds good maybe to those who are living in the neighborhood. But I think we could probably get there without that if we go with something like what Phil suggested, 3%. That's pretty low. And it's going to stop short-term rentals for a long time. It's not going to be any growth if you're worried about growth. There's not going to be any growth for a long time. And we'll whittle down those that are over the limit now in neighborhoods like Pigeon Point, Northwest Quadrant. And eventually, I think it'll return the sense of community to these neighborhoods. So I'm in favor of a 3%. That may be too low for some folks. Maybe 4% is the answer. But whatever we go with, I don't think we should have a percentage and a hard number. I think that certainly if it's as low as 3%, I think it'll take care of the hard number. So.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. No, I agree a lot with what Councilman Mitchell's saying. Short-term rentals, they do have their place. They do serve a purpose. I know a lot of you probably have used them. However, they've just taken over our city and parts of our city, and we need to do something about it. The clustering of them, that's become a problem, a major problem. Moving in on the point that I know that's a big concern. So yes, I am going to be in favor of a cap, which I will be making a motion once we finish.
Councilman
Discussion.
Shalay?
Yeah. So a couple of comments, and then maybe we can discuss some things that really hasn't been discussed, but was part of the overall context. And I've gone back, I've listened to Planning Commission meetings to try to better understand the context of why we got the recommendations that we did. I've met with probably close to 30 residents individually since the time of our last meeting to now to try to better understand differing perspectives. Attended some neighborhood groups where people came together to try to identify solutions. And I know that on one hand, we may deem it, opening a can of worms, but I think that these hard conversations oftentimes allow us to better understand each other, work together to try to find resolve, and negotiate deals that are in the best interest of the entire city. And I hope that that's what we can do with this short-term rental policy. Just making note of a couple of comments that we heard tonight. First, I hope that the hedge funds come in and buy all the STDs up so that we don't have to worry about those anymore. Ms. Howard, you brought up the Riverside property next to you. And I think that it would be unfortunate if a property was in violation and then able to continue operating. I do know that with what we're proposing to pass now, that would not be allowed. If they were found to be operating without a license, they would have the fine, and then they would not be able to operate as a short-term rental for 2 years. But that's if there's even room for them to operate with all of the other criteria. So I know that what we're passing would at least help any future situations like that. Unfortunately, if that doesn't help your situation, I'm sorry for that, because I do think you're right. They should, if they were found to be in violation, they shouldn't be allowed to operate. We heard a comment about grandfathering what currently exists, not counting toward the cap, valid concern, and that was addressed previously, but we had two copies in this packet. One was the previous, and then one was the clean version that was amended, and so maybe you saw that in the previous one, but that has been addressed, and those would count toward the cap, so no issue there. An interesting point on the HOAs too, because I was under the impression naturally that an HOA would operate subservient to the city in the same way that the city does to the state, whereas we can be more restrictive than state law, but we cannot be less restrictive. And it sounds like that is not the case, where HOAs maybe have flexibility to be less restrictive than what city law would be. And if so, that's a problem. And I'm not sure from a legal standpoint how we would address it to make sure that issues like that are addressed to where an HOA can't come in and say, hey, we want 50% or 60% of the homes in this neighborhood to be short-term rentals, because that wouldn't serve the purpose and the intent of what we're trying to pass tonight. So I think maybe trying to better understand that would be of value. Through all the discussions, and I know that the people in the room tonight probably don't believe this, but there are a lot of people in the city and the surrounding areas that will tell you they actually appreciate short-term rentals next to them. Jared, actually, you did put a post up on our Mossy Oaks page to get insight there, and I was surprised to read over 50 of the comments that were actually of the mindset that, you know, before it was a short-term rental, it was a long-term resident or it was a long-term tenant that didn't take care of the property, and a long-term nuisance is worse than a short-term nuisance if you get a bad short-term renter. So I'm just saying that through all of the conversations, I've spoken to people that want us to ban short-term rentals today, forever in the city. I've talked to people who don't think that we have any right to be involved in regulating it at all because they have property rights. And so trying to find middle of the road that protects the city and does provide regulation is a very challenging nut to crack. And then Mr. James brought up an interesting point that I don't think was previously considered in regards to potentially people who have purchased vacant and dilapidated houses with the understanding, based on the current code, that they would be allowed to operate as a short-term rental. And I think that we would do well to try to find a way to respect those who have made previous investments based on previous or current code, and not just rug pull by disabling them from using the property that way. So I would not be in favor of a blanket exemption that allowed anybody who bought a vacant and dilapidated house to use it as a short-term rental, because I think there's more appropriate ways to get that same problem resolved by fixing and restoring the property without relying on it being used as a short-term rental. But I also respect the fact that people like Ethan, who local here, born and raised, been here his whole life, has now invested into a property that he intended to use as a short-term rental. So I would be prepared to introduce language of some kind that would hopefully help in that regards. I too would be in favor of a citywide cap. If we were to say, and I think it's interesting, Mike, you've probably seen this too, being in real estate, but you do see a natural regulation of the free market kind of governing itself, in the sense that we have 250-ish short-term rentals. And I know of many who own a short-term rental that have repositioned into the long-term because they were not getting the bookings that they were, because now there's more short-term rentals to compete with. So there is this reality that the free market will help govern itself. And if we can introduce policy that helps regulate it more on the defensive side, I think we would be better for it, but we can't ignore that fact. If that cap citywide is 4%, based on my understanding, that would allow for about 250 short-term rentals. If it were at 3%, it would allow for 189-ish short-term rentals. I would also be in favor of, and this comes from a compromise, talking to folks in the Point, but also other surrounding areas in the historic district. I would be in favor of a historic district cap that was specific to the entire historic district. And so what that could look like would be, say, a 3%, no more than 3% of the historic district would be allowed to operate as short-term rentals. Right now, in the entire historic district, as I mentioned, we have 91 short-term rentals. If you did a 3% cap, that would mean no more than 32 of the homes could operate as a short-term rental. That would mean that over 60 would have to cease operations as a short-term rental before one was eligible. If you did 6%, obviously that would double and you would allow for 64 in the entire historic district. But I think that either one of those provides enough protection to treat the entire historic district as separate from the rest of the city, because I do feel like our historic district is valuable and we do need to protect that. So I could get on board and justify treating the entire historic district with a separate cap from the rest of the city. But one thing that I wanted to introduce for a talking point, this comes from context from the Planning Commission, is they were proposing to us that we ban investor-owned short-term rentals across the board, but allow for wide open owner-occupied short-term rentals. And I was under the impression that perhaps the vice chair would be here today. He was one who was a proponent of this, and that was because most of the complaints that you hear are in regards to investor-owned short-term rentals where they're not on site and it's poorly managed. But if you had an owner that was on site that lived there and that was their primary residence, you negate a lot of those concerns. And so I would say that if we decided to go with a lower percentage cap, say 3% citywide, no more than 189, that probably be targeted at investor-owned short-term rentals. And I could support owner-occupied short-term rentals not having a cap. But that is because I see that there is value in one, property rights, but there is also a true recognition that if somebody is on site, you're going to have less issues and then an immediate response in the case that you do have an issue, which brings me to the response we have in there now, that they need to respond within 3 hours. I think that needs to change to reflect a response within 1 hour. And this way we can make sure that somebody is a lot closer in case there is any issues. So that's what I have to say on it. And then I don't.
I think Councilman Lipsis has a motion to make.
I do have one, and I think you've been looking at my paper, just joking.
No, I
The
haven't.
motion mirrors what you just said.
Yeah.
At this point, I want to make a motion to amend the ordinance to create an overlay district in the T4HN neighborhoods, creating a 3% cap on all short-term rentals in this district, to make the rest of the city at a 4% cap. In addition to this, neighbors of potential short-term rentals will be notified at application and at approval of short-term rentals.
Hold on a minute. So you've changed your position on the notification? Because if I understood that right, your position now is that neighbors need to be notified
When it's
when they
applied,
apply.
and then when it's approved.
So when this was originally introduced in our strategic
Right.
session, you'd said that you want them to be notified after the short-term rental license, and it would only be the residents that were within 100 feet of that property. Now we're saying notification on application. Are we triggering a public hearing for?
No public hearing. It's just so that they know what's going on.
So they know what's going on, but they have no right to appeal it?
No.
I'm not sure how I feel about that. I think that's an interesting dynamic that is created if you let somebody know there's a short-term rental, but tell them that they have no voice in regards to whether or not that's approved.
Kurt,
What would be the difference in letting them know beforehand versus after?
didn't you indicate concern about that prior to without having a public hearing?
We did, and that's why it's written in the current code to basically we notify after it's approved to all adjoining property owners. That's the current.
Okay.
And the intent,
But,
and the intent of the notification is to make sure that people know contact information, their rights as adjacent property owners.
That's right. But again, it's all of your decisions. I mean,
Okay, I'll amend my motion to notify them after approval.
And you said, just to make sure I'm clear, you said that the citywide cap would be at 4%
4%.
and the
Historic
historic district
dis-
cap would be at
3%,
3%?
correct.
This is a historic district, the entire historic district, the
That's what he
landmark
said, an
district.
overlay. He said overlay.
We were talking about the historic
Historical-
landmark district.
Yes,
So the entire landmark district would be at 3%.
3%.
And that is for the entire landmark district, not the neighborhoods within the district.
With the neighborhoods within the district.
I mean, it's,
Okay.
if it's the historic district landmark, it's the entire historic district is 3%.
Well, I want the historic district, I want Bay Street, the houses along there and the historic name.
They're in the historic
The
district, yeah.
historic
Historic
landmark
district,
district is a very
exactly.
specific geographic area.
Okay,
So you want it to be that in that entire geographic area, the cap is 3%.
correct.
Which, just so we're clear, we're saying that in the entire historic district, no more than 32 short-term rentals will be allowed to operate at any given time.
Correct.
I do think you
After
need
the-
to
after
amend
the
your
cap.
motion because you stated T4HN, so you just need to amend the motion.
Well,
Okay.
I don't know whether we want to say at any given time because
No, after
ones
the
that are
cap.
operating now are going to be grandfathered.
Yeah, they're gonna be
So
grandfathered
that would
in.
take
Yeah, but
effect
they would
once
immediately
come-
count.
Once they come within the.
Yeah, they
gate.
would count.
Right, yeah, they would count, they would immediately, you'd immediately be capped until 60 or so fell off.
Another 40
So
years.
let me ask this then, in relation to the conversation about owner occupied versus
motion on the
investor,
floor.
how does council see the,
Can you describe that for me?
yes, absolutely. What do you want me to describe?
So how is an owner occupied property in STR? Are you talking about just ADUs or rooms within your home?
It could be either one, but regardless, I think that it's important to note that you'd have no more than one short-term rental license per lot. But as an owner occupied, it would be you as an owner living on that lot. So if you had an ADU, then you could use that as a short-term rental. Or if you had a carriage house, you could use that as a short-term rental.
That would be an ADU.
Right.
Anything
Um,
detached from your house is considered an ADU.
Or if you rented out a room as a short-term rental. And I think that there's an argument for that because it makes sense for a lot of people financially to use their property in that way. If you wanted to say, use it as a short-term rental for 6 months, and then you wanted to say, have some family stay there for a period of time. And if you're on site living there and you're taxed at 4%, not given the violations that we have to deal with, but if that's truly your primary residence, I do think that there is merit in protecting the property rights that we have, and I think that
That
those
was
homeowners will.
exempt in the original ordinance.
It was exempt in the original ordinance, and it was recommended by the planning commission that we do that, but we really didn't talk about that at our first reading, and so I'm just trying to see if there's a will here to entertain the difference in owner occupied versus investor, and are we regulating investor owned specifically, or are we kind of try to blanket this and treat them all the same? Because I think it does matter.
When you're owner occupied, you said it's one per lot, so you're talking about if they use an ADU, then they can't rent a room in their house.
Correct.
Okay, and so if they rent a room, then they can't use the ADU for.
Correct.
Okay. Just more clarification on that.
Yep, they would still be bound by the one short-term rental license per lot.
But they'd have to have the license.
They'd have to have a license.
And there not gonna be any licenses available for a long time if we do
They
these
would be,
numbers.
they would be exempt from the cap. So the cap would be to regulate the investor-owned short-term
I don't
rentals.
want
if
any
it stays.
exemptions from the cap. I want the cap.
Right, so and that's fair. I mean,
Prefer.
that's a position, right? You don't want any exemptions and you don't want to treat the owner occupied different than the investor, but that's the conversation on the table, is they are different. And so do we treat them the same or do we treat it different? And I think what we pass either tonight or, if this is first reading and we go to second reading, it does matter.
But if that's the case, then we're only talking about trying to cap investor short-term rentals. Because if any owner occupied lot can have a short-term rental on it, that becomes kind of limitless, right? It's possibly limitless.
We're just a lot, yeah, we're just
So
allowing more.
it's a hard decision and, you know, we're struggling trying to be fair to everybody, but somebody's going to be hurt by this more than others. And I realize that and I'm struggling with it, but I think that's going to be a nightmare to try to have staff manage. I can deal with the 3% of the historic district and 4% outside. Ideally, I'd like 3% citywide, period, and be done with it, and 300-foot property line to property line separation, and just run with it. Over time, this will work itself out, but I think we're gonna make it overly cumbersome and to manage. We start having all these exceptions.
Well, as
So-
I mentioned in the last meeting, you know, we've got a 250, 260, whatever we've got. You know, that's a high number for a small city, compact as we are. When compared to other cities, like, you know, Mount Pleasant, I mentioned the last time, they have 400, that's our cap. They're twice the size of Beaufort in terms of area. They're 50-plus square miles, they're 100,000 population. That's spread out pretty far, and we've already got 250-plus. We're a tiny town of 14,600. We're a compressed area, and a lot of our area is taken up by parks and churches and government buildings and all that, so you're really, it's compact. You talk about density, somebody brought that up before. That's the problem. So it's going to be tough. It's going to take a long time, and I'm all for, you know, capping it. If we're going to do 3%, cap it at 3%, regardless, owner occupied, investor, whatever. Because they're grandfathered. It's going to take a while for that to get there.
It'll be a long time, and if we start giving exemptions, we're gonna start getting more and more. So, no, I wanna, make sure we cap
And if we have,
exemptions.
if we, yeah, I didn't do the math, so Josh, thanks. But if we have a cap of 3%, you know, that allows 189 citywide, and the hard number that I'd heard talking among folks is maybe a hard number of 200. So the 3% cap takes it below that. So I think, you know, especially for the folks on the point, and your concern, I certainly appreciate that. I'm trying to arrive at a language that would allow basically elimination. Basically, you have the exemption minus the word exemption is my goal. That's why I find the 3% cap attractive, so.
So it seems like the will of council at this point is to not treat owner occupied different than investor. Is that fair to say?
I think it's
You
a
mean
net,
not include them in the cap?
No, to include them in, so they're subjected to the cap just the same as
Everybody's the
investor.
same.
Yeah,
Right.
we made that mistake before. Let's not do it again.
Okay, fair enough. So what I'll say now is I wrote down some language to address Ethan's situation, but I don't want to single him out. I mean, obviously, he came to us with his particular situation, but I would imagine that there's probably others who have invested substantially with the understanding that they would be allowed to do something that now we're potentially changing. And so in keeping with trying to respect that, I'm going to read some language and then we can talk about if that's something that you guys would approve of or not. So essentially, this would add a new subsection under section 7-18002A. Abandoned and dilapidated property purchaser incentive. Notwithstanding the caps established in this section, a short-term rental permit may be issued to a purchaser of a property that A, was identified by the city of Beaufort on an official abandoned or dilapidated property list at any time between September 1st of 25 and September 30th of 26. And B, was acquired by the current owner during that same time period. And C, has been brought into full compliance with applicable building safety and zoning requirements following acquisition. And D, has received a certificate of occupancy or final inspection approval. The exemption provided herein shall apply only to the initial purchaser who rehabilitated the property and shall not run with the land. Any subsequent conveyance of the property subject shall subject the short-term rental to all applicable caps and regulations in effect at that time. Permits issued under this subsection shall not count toward the caps established herein. So I chose that time frame because September 25 is when the Planning Commission provided a recommendation, and it basically provides a 12-month period of time. If you purchased a home that is identified on the vacant and dilapidated structure list within that time frame, it could be used as a short-term rental. You couldn't sell it and have it run with the land. And it's not a blanket exemption for all vacant and dilapidated structures that are purchased from, future dates to be allowed to be used as short-term rental. So I think it's a fair middle ground. But what are your thoughts?
I can live with it. How many do we have now? Do you know, Kurt? How many dilapidated or
We have
abandoned homes?
44 vacant and dilapidated homes in the historic district.
And how many,
Outside of that, we don't really keep a official list.
how many have applied for short-term rental, you know?
I can't tell
Because
you.
if they run to September, that doesn't give, unless somebody buys property right now.
Mm-hmm. And I don't even care. It could be something that is stopped at the end, when we pass second reading, right? I mean, it can be from September 25 to whatever the date is when we have second reading. I think it's just important that what we don't do is make a policy that basically blindsides anybody who made a substantial investment with the understanding that our current code would allow them to use it as a short-term rental if they were buying it for the purpose of restoring a structure that's been vacant and, falling in on itself for decades at this point. And I'm not saying that's an incentive that we should identify moving forward because there's better alternatives. But in respect for those who have made investments based on our previous code, this is a way to kind of provide some kind of protection.
By the way, this is second reading.
Right.
So that would be kind of treated like a grandfather, like someone who already has a short-term operating rental now.
Amendment.
Is that correct?
Correct.
You make an amendment.
I ain't gonna do it.
I could live with that.
What was that?
Well,
Right now, we got one
we
amendment.
have an amendment on the floor.
Is this going to be something that we're able to do as a second reading? With the amendments that we made previous, and then the amendments that have just been introduced, and then the potential amendment for,
There are too many changes, in other words.
I'm not the city attorney, but I know he had some concern.
on vacation, right?
He had some concern about this going to, but I can't put words in his mouth, so
To go into second reading.
just the current amendments going to second, I think.
Okay, so then it's got to be.
So
an
again,
amendment.
I'm just, maybe.
So what would be the appropriate process if there was one to rescind what's in front of us and then introduce something? Could we introduce anything tonight as a first reading, or does it have to move till next month as first reading?
I believe it would be best served by moving to next month as first reading, but what you could do this evening is you could make a motion to withdraw the current ordinance with the understanding that staff would bring back to you a different ordinance for first reading at a subsequent meeting of council.
So, and here would be my concern with that is then we would, which we may not have a way around it, but then we would add 2 months more to this process, allowing basically an open window for people to come in and apply for short-term rentals. And I know that's a valid concern in the community. And I've taken a position against moratorium because I know a moratorium would take 2 months to get across the finish line. And I think it'd be more valuable for us to put in the time to get something passed here. But,
Councilman, to address that concern, I would be willing to have a conversation with our city attorney to see if we could exercise pending ordinance doctrine on first reading, which means upon first reading, the ordinance becomes effective.
that would be good.
But is there anything that we can do from the standpoint of what we've done with first reading on this now that would give us the opportunity to do the same thing with pending ordinance? To preclude any new applications from being considered?
You could perhaps adopt the first.
I do not believe so, not without consulting our city attorney first. I would not want to run the risk of violating someone's property rights unduly.
Sure.
we could adopt this and then you can come back and amend it. And it'd be take 2 readings to amend it to get everything we want in there. And that way it's holding up. That way we do, stop any new ones from coming in. And then we can go back in,
Like adopt this as second reading, you're saying?
adopt second reading, but then we come back and we do a new ordinance to amend it, to amend this and put the things in that you want, and we just change it, that way. And that way this stops anything else from coming in.
But
And we
isn't
have
that
this
what
in effect
our attorney had some concerns with that, this being adopted as second reading though?
Right.
Right. But we could come back and pass a new ordinance to amend this ordinance, the second reading.
I'm between a rock and a hard place here. Because hoping to get this done.
That's what I'm saying, we get this done, but then we can do some changes at a later time, pass some ordinances to amend this ordinance.
I would say that I'm not an attorney.
I'm not
I
either.
would
Not
say,
either.
And I don't
I
play
would
one on
say,
TV.
though I'm not an attorney and I'm stating for multiple reasons that I'm not an attorney, I would say that that would be very poor governance to go in that direction.
Could we do this? I mean, I don't know how the rest of you feel, but we have a meeting on the 28th, right? So, or maybe even the 21st. But is there time for us to have one agenda item on the back end of, say, that work session to where we have a first reading on the new draft
Our
and then
char-
introduce
Our
the
charter,
pending?
our charter allows the mayor and one other member of council to call special meetings within
call a
40
special
48
meeting.
hours.
Right. Yep. So that's
We
what,
can do
that's what I'm
meetings
saying.
3 times a week.
Is then if we had
Y'all ready for this?
one agenda item, which was this, and to say the 21st, when we have that meeting, and then we could go ahead and have first reading with the pending solution that you provided to go ahead and implement that on the 21st essentially, and then that would stop any new short-term rental applications from coming in, and then we could have second reading in May.
That's a lot. I'm processing all of that.
Yeah.
You do know this is budget season, right?
Yes, I do. Absolutely. I would want to consult with our city attorney. I would really recommend doing that before we go through all those steps that you just mentioned. Just for your own protection and the protection of the property owners as well. I think that would be advised. I want to, I know it was mentioned that it takes, one council member and the mayor to call a special meeting, or 2 council members to call a special meeting.
Would you like?
However,
I'll
I
make-
do want to point out that you have to exercise a cooling off period of at least 6 days between readings of an ordinance. That's state statute. So you
Yeah,
can't have.
7 in between now and the 21st.
Yeah.
I know, I'm just pointing that out as should you want to call.
I
a
was
special
kidding
meeting.
on the
Just-
3 a week.
Just want
No, we can call a special meeting after our budget workshop.
Councilman Mitchell mentioned he wanted to have 3 meetings a week, so it made me nervous. I had to say that.
Yeah,
Which
let's
Mitchell is
plan-
that?
Let's plan on calling a special meeting if I can get some support for it, but do it on the 21st after the budget workshop. Take care of what we need to take care of, and that'll be first reading, and then we'll go to second reading.
I'm good with that.
So I have a question that I'm foggy on.
Well,
So Josh is concerned with protecting purchases like the gentleman here, pardon me for forgetting your name, but
Ethan.
Ethan, I'm sorry, that have already invested in property that they intend to make it to a short-term rental. So what's the difference between that and couldn't we just grandfather those people in tonight? Like I think the consensus is to grandfather folks who already have short-term rentals. Why couldn't we have amendment language that includes folks like Ethan who has properties and just stop it right there tonight? Anyone beyond the night won't be able to be a part of this and do a 3% citywide or 3% in the historic district, 4% outside and move on.
So that language that I read does exactly that. But it stops that window at whatever second and final reading is of this ordinance. Therefore, whoever purchased property that was identified as vacant and dilapidated, they would be able to use that as a short-term rental if they purchased it from September of 25 to whatever date is for second reading. And then,
Oh, this
and then
is
it's
second
not,
reading.
and then it doesn't go past that. It
So this
doesn't,
is second reading, right?
This
So
is
if we do
second
it
reading.
tonight,
He's saying
it
if
would
we
be
do it
done, right?
tonight.
But we're not gonna have second reading tonight. That's that we're just talking about.
No,
I don't know.
We're one to do
we haven't
second
voted
reading.
on that.
Yeah, he was just throwing the idea out. If we did second reading tonight and included the exception for Ethan, that, that would pretty much,
I want to put this to bed tonight.
Yeah, I don't see why we can't do this tonight. Because then folks like Ethan will be grandfathered in and beyond tonight, second reading.
We spent way too
What else
much
is that?
time on this and the public has been,
would have been
Haven't
better if.
figured
the
too much.
attorney
We
was
need to
here.
put
He
this to
wasn't in
bed.
here.
And disregard the attorney's concern?
Won't be the first. one.
Well, if the,
I'm getting tired and flipping.
if the attorney, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, if everybody's in agreement, let's go ahead and schedule a special meeting, if I have somebody to second it, for the 21st. Clean all this up, that'd be first reading, and then we have it in May.
That's what I would support.
Well, I'm only doing that because I want to hear what the attorney's got to say. I don't want to step out and.
Yeah, I think we need clarification on the three-strike policy. We need clarification on the exemption. We now have another exemption, and we need to get all these other amendments factored into one clean draft, and then we can have first reading on that in 21st, second reading in May. That's what I would support, but if what we want to do is,
I think he's on vacation till the 20th.
you know,
And also if you could make, so I can write the ordinance, if I know if you're going to go with the 3%, I think that would be helpful if we're going to have the, just so.
You're asking a lot.
still got a motion on the floor.
we have a motion on the floor.
But
Oh, we do?
just
Yeah,
a thought.
Neil, you want to make it again, real quick, so everybody's remembrance?
Okay, let me get it real quickly here.
Because we got to vote on it, up or down.
Okay, this point, okay, I want to make a motion to amend the ordinance to create an overlay district in the historic landmark district.
what are we doing? That's what I'm wondering. Are we,
Where-
Or is it historic neighborhoods? How was it you wanted?
But I thought we decided we were gonna do a special meeting on the 21st.
Well, I've still got the motion on the floor, though.
We got to get,
We got to vote it up or down.
Withdraw the motion.
yeah, you can withdraw the motion.
I don't want
You
to.
don't have to vote on it.
I don't
You
want
can
to
just
withdraw it.
All right, ask for a second then.
Okay, it was seconded. I had a vote. So you can vote it up or down, but I've got a motion. I'm not going to withdraw it. I'm sorry. I want to get this over with.
Call for a vote then.
All right, all in favor of the amendment, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Sorry, could you restate the amendment, please?
It's the 3% in the historic district and the 4% citywide and notification at the time of approval to the neighbors.
approval or at the time of application?
After
Approval.
application.
He said approval.
Approval. Okay.
That's what you corrected me on. I
Because of-
changed it
because
to
of
that.
the Public hearing.
Can we still ask questions?
Yeah, it's been motion a second, you can still discuss.
He felt like he needed to fulfill the motion. We were going.
I just want to vote it up or down and then you can decide whether or not to.
I wanted to get this behind us, but we got,
I just want to get this
All
whole
of-
thing behind us. It's for all of us. I mean, it's been too much time spent. This issue.
Tracy?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. There was a second originally.
yeah, I made the second.
The
Yeah,
mayor was.
I did.
The mayor made a second on it originally. I mean, if y'all don't want to vote, you want to vote it down for now, vote it down, but it'll come back up.
All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, it doesn't pass. So now,
All opposed, you had 3 opposed.
yeah, you got 3 votes.
We all voted no.
So now we need to think about a special, and I'd like to get a second on it, but a special meeting on the 21st. Provided we can get a hold of the city attorney and get some of these things ironed out and revisit this so we can vote on it in May and be done with it.
Second.
Second. Any discussion on that?
Mr. Mayor, could you repeat the motion, please? I did not hear it.
That we would have a special meeting called for the 21st after our budget workshop to discuss the first reading of this amended, to be amended issue with the short-term rentals.
Okay, so just for clarity's sake for staff, would this be first reading of a new ordinance?
Correct.
Of the cleaned up one of
Cleaned
the
up.
conversations.
Okay, but first reading of a new ordinance? Okay, so may I recommend respectfully to council that you make a motion to withdraw the current ordinance?
I'll make a motion to withdraw the current ordinance.
So we have,
Second.
wait. We already have a motion.
No, we just voted it. We
voted.
we just voted for that.
You just voted me down.
That's done.
We
It was
just
vo-
voted on, I didn't vote on it.
Nope.
We declined that when he made a motion on the 21st and I
Yeah,
seconded.
but this is what we're talking about. Yeah, we got to
So-
vote on that. So
I see what you're saying.
But he's asking us to withdraw it. Do we need to withdraw it before we do the special meeting?
Yeah, so order of operations correctly would be you would withdraw the ordinance
My
first.
second. I withdraw my second, okay? Okay, now we're done.
withdraw.
Okay, so if you withdraw your second, you withdraw that motion, I'll make a motion that we rescind the
Withdraw the
ordinance.
Go for it.
Do I have a
Withdraw.
second on that?
Withdraw.
Second.
Second.
Let's go.
Now we vote on
Withdraw.
21st. on
Yep.
withdrawing.
Withdraw.
Withdrawing it. Correct.
All in favor of withdrawing the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Okay, got opposed, we got.
I oppose.
Okay, now, we have an amendment to 21st.
Motion, special meeting on 21st.
Special meeting.
I oppose.
Second. Well, I'll make that motion because you can't make
Right,
that
okay.
motion. So I'll make a motion that we have a special meeting on the 21st for first reading of the short-term
The
rental.
First reading of
First reading,
short-term
yep.
rentals, and I will second that.
Got a second.
Mr. Mayor, just for a short point of privilege, may I just check with our Director of Community Development to be sure he has all the guidance that he needs at this point to put together the
Okay.
ordinance for the 21st?
Clear as mud?
I think I just need to know, do you want to go with Mr. Councilman Lipsett's motion? Or there seemed to be, there was 3%, he said 4%. And also, do you want Councilman Scoletti's amendment for the vacant and dilapidated exemption? Just as we prepare this ordinance, I think I just need clarification on that, both of those. So we don't do this on first reading again.
Those, the direction of council in degree of 3 and 4, 300 feet, the dilapidated structures.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
And
Notification.
3% and
Notification,
4%.
Notification
Notification.
upon permitted,
And the response within an hour.
and the other enforcement, we're gonna fine tune.
It's 3 strikes. And I think you wanted that, the other cleanups, and then do you want the 3% cap or the 4% cap? Because there was.
It's
some-
4% citywide and a 3% in the historic district was proposed.
Is that,
Historic district
is
landmark.
everybody in
district.
agreement on that?
And no ISTRs, right?
Just.
What's that?
And no investor short-term rentals, right?
I thought we were gonna leave that out.
No, that's not, we're not banning
No, I
that.
don't think we're gonna mess with that.
Okay.
Because that's egregious.
Okay,
No
so
STDs.
Is that?
4% citywide, 3% historic district, the exemption for vacant and dilapidated. And you could, Councilman, you can maybe provide that language. I think
Absolutely.
that would
So,
be great.
and I'm not against that. I didn't mean to imply that, but so is there going to be language also about time for the ISDR owners to be on property to address the?
1 hour.
1 hour?
Okay, we can make that change too.
And I thought I heard a notification requirement of neighbors as well.
That's right.
Is that,
An
Upon
application.
permitting, upon permitting.
I think that's already in there, to be honest.
It is in there. It's in the old ordinance, but.
Okay, I think I have
Clear as
enough
mud, right?
information. Yeah, Tracy and I will talk a lot, I'm sure.
Tracy, yes.
So,
You'll be
Yes.
going back.
I was voting against dropping the ordinance, dropping the.
Withdrawing the ordinance.
Withdrawing
On
it.
the ordinance.
I voted against it, withdrawing it, because I wanted it voted on tonight. 4-1.
Yeah. And the only reason is I would have voted with Neil. The problem is we got to get our attorney and get some clarification on some issues. None of us are attorneys.
We made that point.
And none of us played one on TV.
'21st special meeting. Okay.
Is that the 21st?
Thanks, Kurt.
Second reading?
21st.
It feels like we've had 21 first readings.
Yeah, this will be the third.
While there's a moment of silence, I just want to say thank you to Kat and Justin Rose specifically, because I know that maybe you guys have as well, but I've been requesting several points of data from them, and they have both been, as I'm sure staff has been throughout this entire process, very receptive, very quick to respond and willing to provide information. And it's so helpful to be able to see, okay, if you're going to pass a 3%, what does that do in the historic district? What's the number that you're allowing? And so I just want to say thank you for.
Everything's red.
What's that?
Everything's red.
Yeah,
The whole city's red.
yeah, exactly. Well, I just want to say thank you to them because they were very responsive and helpful throughout this process.
Scott, what time would that special meeting be on that day?
The workshop is scheduled for 5 PM. But we can roll into the regular meeting right after the workshop, or we can reverse the order. It's up to council.
What's council's preference?
I think reverse the order so that we don't have a big crowd waiting all night.
Okay. We'll reverse it. Start our special meeting at 5.
Okay, very good. That's how we'll structure the agenda then.
Everybody leaving?
No, they didn't get,
What was spent, what was spent here to talk about?
I'm surprised Ben wasn't here. Okay, moving on. In new business, we have a request for Historic Beaufort Foundation to host a 2026 Lafayette Soiree on May 16th, 2026, from 6 PM to 10:30 PM with allowance to transport participants from remote parking to 500 Port Republic Street, signage and waiver of loud and unseemly noise. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved to approve.
Second.
Okay.
We just voted on it.
Jennifer? All right, well. Okay.
It's Jennifer's birthday.
Yes.
Happy birthday,
is.
Jennifer.
So the Historic Beaufort Foundation is having their annual soiree on May 16th. The location of the soiree has, of course, it is in a different location. That's why it's new business. Everything else about the soiree is very similar to the way they have done it in the past. This is at 500. It is going to be located at 500 Port Republic Street, and that is in the Point neighborhood. Staff recommends acceptance.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Lise. Okay, next is an ordinance authorizing and approving the First Amendment to that certain 2024 series ordinance dated January 9th, 2024, and other matters relating thereto. This is first reading.
So.
Do I have a motion?
You had a motion and I'll second it.
Okay, Alan?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. During the February quarterly capital projects meeting, there was a discussion about whether the remaining 2024 Parks and Tourism revenue bonds could be spent on the Henry C. Chambers Waterfront Park. The city contacted our bond council and they stated that we needed to ask for the bond purchaser's consent. We have that approval and we have the modification now to the series ordinance that does include the Waterfront Park as one of the eligible projects for this use of these bond funds. And this requires 2 readings. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Alan?
No.
Okay, hearing none. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Sorry.
Oh, you have something?
This was our item B. Correct?
This is item B.
Yeah.
In our new business.
Okay, no questions on this one.
Okay, we'll call a vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Nay.
Okay, you vote nay. All right. 4-1. Okay, next is an ordinance to amend the City of Beaufort Ordinance 2025/13 regarding fiscal year 2025-26 City of Beaufort budget to provide for revenues and expenditures of Parks and Tourism Fund and Capital Projects Fund. This is first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion is second.
Okay,
Alan?
the Waterfront Park relieving platform was deemed unsafe for public use in July 2025, resulting in the closure of the Waterfront Park Day Dock to public due to safety concerns. The city desires to restore temporary public access to the day dock, while a long-term solution for the Waterfront Park relieving platform is designed, permitted, and constructed. The Waterfront Day Dock project will provide interim public access and support continued recreation and tourism activity along the Beaufort River. And so,
Hospitality.
am I reading the right one? City
That's
Waterfront
there.
Park.
Let's see.
The Waterfront Park Day Dock was originally budgeted for $250,000.
No, you're right.
Alan, I believe the item we're on is item C under new business.
Yeah, see.
Yeah.
The ordinance to amend Beaufort Ordinance 2025-13 regarding fiscal year 2025-26 City of Beaufort budget.
Okay. My bad.
Or is it? Yeah, so the Waterfront Park was, park project was budgeted $250,000 from the Parks and Tourism Fund and fiscal year 26. During the project development, it was determined that the existing 80-foot gangway could not be reused due to its condition and incompatibility with the temporary access design. As a result, the city must procure a new 75-foot and 45-foot gangways to safely reconnect the public to the day dock, resulting in increased project cost. And so this budget amendment includes an additional $75,000 to fully fund this project. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions?
I have a comment, maybe it's a question, but I was concerned that for the number of people that this new interim access to the day dock of the river, the number of people benefiting from that versus those who do not have boats is a concern of mine, but I would like the city manager to share with everyone what he shared with me in regards to the federal involvement with that in regards to the urgency for us to do something.
Yes, Councilman, I would be happy to. We were contacted by South Carolina DNR, who are the state agents for the federal program that funded the construction of that day dock. And we were contacted because they were caught off guard and were unaware that the day dock was closed to the public. Part of the requirement of the funding is that we maintain public access to that day dock. And so we provided them with a thorough explanation of why that was. We explained that the relieving platform was off limits to pedestrians for safety reasons, and that the dock connected directly to the relieving platform. And we also communicated that we were working on a solution to provide access to the public that would span the relieving platform and take pedestrians straight into the park from the dock. And they seem to be satisfied that we were working toward a solution, but they want to be kept informed as to where we are with that process. So to me, that implies that we have an obligation, if we have the means to do so, to keep that dock open.
So thank you, Scott. And with that, what was going to be a no vote for me changed to a yes.
I have a comment, and this is one that I've struggled with, to be honest with you, because on one hand, I see it as, we have constituents who appreciate accessibility to the water, and I think that restoring this, not only from a federal obligation, but just from the perspective of trying to meet that need that we do have for a day dock, but also the appreciation for those who want access to the water restored. On the other hand, I look at it and I say, could we better use $300,000 elsewhere? We do have the dinghy dock being restored, which we hope to have open by May 1st. And we do have empty space over at the marina. Is there a discussion that could be had that allows us to utilize that space as well? And so I've been going back and forth on this. We were told last night at the Waterfront Advisory Committee meeting that the cost had gone up, and the justification and reasons for why And it even made it harder for me to be a yes vote on this. We had some discussion as a committee last night, and there seemed to be resolve that still supported this effort in getting the day dock back open. And so I was going to be a yes vote, and I'll tell you why I changed that position again. And that is because after reading through the packet, and I'll be very clear on this, I don't think that this was intentional by any means. I think that staff's intention was to have expertise at the table. And I'm not entirely sure of what partnerships exist or don't. But I will say that in reading this, to learn that McSweeney had a representative on the selection committee, which decided to select O'Quinn, an engineering firm in which they are partnered with, leads me to believe there may be a conflict there. And if nothing else, the appearance of a conflict. And so while I think that the intent was pure to have expertise at the table, and I think that when you read the two bid proposals, it is pretty clear that O'Quinn is the better and more qualified candidate, because it's one, less money, two, they're familiar with it, three, they were the ones that installed the day dock originally. I mean, there's multiple reasons for why you would choose O'Quinn as the firm to go with, but I can't ignore the fact that McSweeney had representation on the selection committee, and so for that reason, I'm going to be a no vote on this.
Okay, now I'm going to call a question. All in favor of the ordinance to amend the City of Beaufort ordinance for this day dock, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay?
Aye.
Okay. He voted yay, yeah. Okay, next we have an ordinance amending Part 7, Licensing and Regulation, Chapter 13, Hospitality Fee. This is first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. Alan, you want to?
All right, yeah, so we met about this last month during the work session. So the city ordinance includes a 5% hospitality distribution to the city's design marketing organization and 1.1% to nonprofits. But we met with Baja, they provided a proposal, and staff has implemented those changes into the ordinance for consideration, which you'll see kind of a red line version of the ordinance, as far as adding the words, as it was just saying advertising, as advertising and events within the 1.1% designation. Also, we expanded to the city of Beaufort enlarged rather than just the downtown area. And then also we added the city's designated area hospitality association as for funding for this 1.1%. I think everything else remained about the same, but happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from council? Okay, hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next is an authorization to allow the city manager to enter into a contractual agreement for Waterfront Park Day Dock project. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. All right, Alan, you want to?
Yeah, back in March 19th, the city issued a request for proposal for Waterfront Park Day Dock modifications. It was public notice, it was posted on the state procurement website as well as our website, and then advertised in the Island News. We received 2 bids that came in, and one from Kate Romaine and one from O'Quinn Marine. And so on April 6th, the selection committee consists of Eric Clausen, Brian Rager, myself, and Bill Barna to review the proposals. And it was determined for the city to approve O'Quinn, but to not accept the credit of $7,500 for the existing gangway. So therefore, the contract amount is $306,775. And we feel like the committee was unanimous in the recommendation for O'Quinn Marine for this contract. Answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Okay, hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay.
I'm a no vote on that, just to
Okay,
be,
was
yeah,
that- okay.
consistent with
Yeah,
the
be consistent.
potential conflict there.
Okay, 4 ayes, 1 nay. All right, next is a resolution adopting the City of Beaufort's priority community development needs for 2026.
So moved.
We have a motion, a second. Scott, you want to fill us in on this?
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. This is an annual requirement that we have to participate in the Community Development Block Grant Program through the Low Country Council of Governments. And the exercise we need to go through annually is to prioritize our community development needs, because these prioritizations are taken into consideration when we apply for CDBG grants, of which we should soon be eligible for 2 additional CDBG grants. Staff has identified a recommended priority. If you look at page 273 of your packet is the resolution. The first priority we recommend is improvements to public recreation facilities that benefit low and moderate income persons. I will explain the rationale for putting this at number 1. We have 2 parks right now that could definitely benefit from this. One is the First South Carolina Volunteer Park. And the other park is the Southside Park, which we are looking for funds for phase 2 for that. We had some discussion on that at our last meeting. And so we believe that those areas are ripe for CDBG funding, given the LMI considerations within close proximity to those parks. We've had a conversation with the executive director of LCOG. He shares our optimism that those areas would qualify for CDBG grants. So that's why we have that as number 1 on the list of 5. The second is housing programs, housing repair for low and moderate income homeowners and for rental units occupied by low and moderate income renters. Programs to promote new affordable rental housing, programs and policies to promote home ownership for low and moderate income households, and incentives to promote affordable infill housing. The third prioritization is funding for public facilities, transportation and services, other activities that strengthen existing community quality of life, such as parking garage, event center, education and workforce development, public health and safety. The fourth item is drainage improvements in low and moderate income neighborhoods as identified in our capital improvement plan. And the fifth and last priority is streetscape improvements in low and moderate income neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you. All right, all in favor of the resolution?
I would just like to make a comment on that.
Okay,
and-
go ahead.
and I appreciate, Scott, the explanation there. I would respectfully disagree and say that, to me, the third priority that we have there, specifically honing in on transportation, is probably our biggest priority at this point, aside from, what we have with the waterfront park. But us putting improvements to public recreation facilities is not encompassing our work at the waterfront park. It's specifically related to the other 2 parks that we have. And I'm not saying that those are not priority, but I would not put transportation priority as 3 and public recreation as 1. At this point where we are, I would put transportation first.
I would object and say that the recreation would be number 1. You could put transportation number 2 for the grants.
Is it also based somewhat on which one is most, ripest for approval for the block grant?
That was part of the consideration, yes, Councilman.
Do we feel like transportation would not be?
When it's based on LMI concerns, I guess we would have to do analysis of what projects we could identify in which areas to determine if they're ripe or not ripe. I think it's a feasible option to place that as a number 2 priority. We know we're ripe for the number 1 priority. And so being consistent with what we request in our CDBG grants with what we said our priorities were, I think that carries some weight in the request. So.
Yeah, LMI weighs heavy in this because it competes for that money. There's competition.
Right. While I still feel like transportation is the number 1, I could support moving that to number 2 and keeping basically moving the housing program to 3.
Is there a priority to the 5?
Yes, they are in priority order.
And that gives us more money by priority, potentially?
Your priority is taken into consideration when you make your request.
But it
for
wouldn't
grant.
necessarily limit the dollar amounts on the 2 sides.
No, it does not.
Will the council to put transportation at number 2?
No.
Okay.
Uh,
Mike?
My,
Okay.
I'm good.
I'm in favor of keeping it the way it is.
We need
So,
to-
so we would need an amendment to amend the resolution to swap the second and third priorities, placing public facilities, transportation and services second, and housing programs third.
And I will go ahead and make that motion to swap to make funding for public facilities, transportation and services number 2 and housing programs number 3.
Got a second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, going back, we have to do the resolution again.
As amended.
Good. Just for clarity, what's going to be number 1?
Recreation.
Public recreation.
Okay, then I vote in favor.
In favor?
Okay, now the amended motion,
What's that?
amended motion we need.
Yeah, that was the amended motion.
Okay,
Now we
then
gotta
the
have
main
to, we're
motion.
voting on the real motion
And now you're voting on the resolution as amended.
with the amendment. So all in favor of the amended motion, as presented,
Aye.
signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Next is a resolution expressing conditional support for the South Carolina Senate Bill 866 Municipal Tax Relief Act and advocating for amendments to enhance municipal flexibility.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Eric?
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Council is being asked to consider this resolution expressing conditional support for South Carolina's Senate Bill 866, known as the Municipal Tax Relief Act. This legislation would provide municipalities, if approved by voters, the ability to implement a 1% local sales tax to provide direct property tax relief to residents and fund core government services and capital infrastructure. The bill requires that 20% of the revenue generated be dedicated to reducing municipal property taxes, with the remaining funds eligible for use such as infrastructure, drainage, transportation improvements, and public safety facilities. If authorized and approved by voters, a 1% municipal sales tax could generate approximately 8.3 million annually. That's for the city of Beaufort, or roughly 66 million over the course of the 8-year period, with 13 million of that going towards property tax relief. While the concept of providing municipalities with an additional sales tax revenue tool with this tool is positive, the current version of the bill has some caveats that limit its effectiveness. The challenges the city of Beaufort would recommend to include is to request removal of the 8-year sunset, allowing the tax continue year to year unless repealed by voter referendum, consistent with local option sales tax. So essentially, we would be implementing property tax relief, and then in 8 years, that would revert back to whatever the property tax bill was prior. So again, asking for that not to sunset. The second would be modification to eligible provisions to ensure municipalities are not restricted by county-level tax structures that are afforded equitable access to this funding mechanism. So right now, the only municipalities that are eligible are those within counties that don't currently have an additional sales tax option. So I believe there's only 4 counties in the state of South Carolina that would be eligible at this point. So again, rather than pitting municipalities against counties and vice versa, allowing municipalities to have our own sales tax. Conditional support of this resolution positions the city to proactively engage with the legislative delegation and advocate for more effective and flexible version of the bill that better serves the long-term financial sustainability and capital planning needs of the city. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Thank you for that, by the way. I think that you guys did a very good job at identifying what the concerns were and then reflecting what municipalities, especially ours, should be advocating for. So thank you.
Okay, next is a resolution expressing opposition to the proposed termination of the history program at the University of South Carolina, Beaufort, and memorializing council's unanimous support previously expressed through a signed letter.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Okay, Scott, you want to?
Mayor and council, as you all are well aware, but I will just cover it briefly for the public who are watching. The South Carolina Commission on Higher Education has targeted the history program at USCB for termination. And I believe that's due to recent low enrollments. However, you all signed a joint letter on April 7th to the South Carolina Commission on Higher Education opposing the termination of that program at USCB, as is appropriate for an historic community like such as ours. And so this resolution simply memorializes your support for keeping the program, and we will send copies of this letter as appropriate to the South Carolina Commission on Higher Education, and we'll also let our lawmakers know that we've passed a resolution to that effect as well.
Okay, I also want to recognize Dr. James Shin, who's here tonight. Thanks for coming, James. Appreciate it.
And Dr. Larry, and
Yeah.
Larry Rowland.
Larry here? Oh, there he is. I didn't see you back there, Larry.
You didn't recognize him.
Okay. Sorry, I would have recognized you earlier. Okay, all in favor signify of this resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Appreciate it. Next is a resolution of City Council of the City of Beaufort, South Carolina, authorizing the city manager to execute a grant agreement with the Beaufort County Economic Development Corporation for economic development activities within the Commerce Park. And again, I have to recuse myself, so Mike, you want to take over the?
I'll be glad to. Have a motion?
Second.
Thank you.
Good evening again, council. I feel like we've come full circle. This is the topic I came up to address with you first this evening. This is the actual resolution to approve the agreement between the city and the Beaufort County Economic Development Corporation for the $1 million, which is in excess of the $40,000 per acre for the purchase agreement that you approved earlier this evening. There were some really valid concerns, I think, that were raised. One of them was what will be done with the interest that's gained from the money that sits in the account. I think you could probably solve that by amending the agreement to include, and I'm trying to find the paragraph, paragraph 1.3A in the agreement. I believe you could amend that to say grant funds plus any interest accrued shall be used solely for the site development and related economic development activities within Beaufort Commerce Park. I think you could solve the interest issue. You may have other concerns as well that you want to discuss, but I just wanted to address that with you right up front. I think we could solve that particular issue. The paragraph is titled Use and Stewardship of Grant Funds in the agreement itself.
Scott, where was that one more time?
It's paragraph 1.3A in Exhibit A. Are you finding it?
What page is this on in our package?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on Exhibit A, and you said it was use and stewardship of grant funds.
Right, that paragraph. I believe you could modify subparagraph A to satisfy the interest concerns.
And I appreciate you identifying a path forward on that specific concern. I guess my overall concern is I do not understand why we as a city would not take the $2.2 million, and then if we decided down the road that we were going to provide funding for some project or some developer or the Commerce Park and site development, then we could do that. I'm not sure I understand why we would go ahead and commit $1 million to have in a separate fund managed by the Economic Development Corporation, even if we were to satisfy the interest concern. So I do think that there would be value if the overall consensus of council is to support this resolution, for there to be an amendment that protects the interest and the city's interest in that interest born from these funds. But I would still be a no vote just because I feel like these funds would be better suited with the city. And if we decided at a later date to do something else with them, we could do that.
Understood.
Well, I would be satisfied if we could have language that clearly states that any accrued interest would belong to the city, so that we can move forward with this.
I would agree with that too.
Do we have a severability from the standpoint that if we decide that we want to do something different with it, we're not beholden to any timeframes?
I'm looking at the term and termination clause now to see.
Term is for 5 years with the option to
Mhm.
extend for 2 additional 5-year terms.
It is.
Unless renewed, yeah. Or written mutual agreement of termination by both parties.
In which case, all of the remaining funding comes back to the city.
My silence is in that I'm resolved in the matter and I'm ready to vote.
I'm sorry?
My silence is just because I'm resolved in the matter and ready to vote if.
No. I was just trying to read through. I mean, as long as we control interest, financial side interest and the ability to terminate, I'm okay with it. So, any other comments, questions? Margaret?
So at this point, we don't control the ability to terminate. It is both parties have to agree to that termination.
It appears so, yes.
Yeah, so you would need to change both of those things, right?
Unless, of course, if the Economic Development Corp dissolved, of course, or then the funds would come
Sure,
back to us.
right, Yep,
Right, that part is.
that's covered in.
Right.
Okay. So do we have an amendment for changes?
Not yet.
No one has made a motion to amend yet.
I'm chairing, so somebody else needs to make the amendment. Philip says, can you do the amendments?
Yes. Just tell me what the amendments are.
I would, respectfully, if I could just suggest, if you do want to put a clause like that in there, you would move to amend paragraph 1.3 subparagraph A to include a provision to ensure that any interest borne on the funds would also be used toward the Commerce Park.
Okay. What he said.
Shouldn't we say that it should accrue to the city versus the Commerce Park? Because I don't think, if I understood John correctly earlier, that funds don't have to be used in the city if we decide to use it somewhere else. So maybe we should just say it would accrue to the city.
Well, that would be an absence of the agreement. According to this agreement, they have to be used in the Commerce Park. What he was saying was if you choose not to adopt this agreement, then they can be used anywhere else in the city. What this
Is that right,
agreement
John?
does is that this agreement says that we will provide $1 million to the Economic Development Corporation, and in return, they will use that to further development within the Beaufort Commerce Park.
I don't think that was the response that John gave me earlier. I'm not disputing what you
Right.
said, but he's right. Okay. Okay. Good.
Okay, I make a motion to amend as recommended by city manager.
You've got the interest covered, but you don't have the termination covered. And I don't know if you want to or not, but I'm just gonna bring it up that you don't have that covered right now.
concerned about that. So the, for it to be used exclusively for the Commerce Parks concerns me. Because that kind of negates what we're trying to jive at is we may want to use that money somewhere else. And if it's restricted solely to the Commerce Park, that kind of ties our hands.
Well, and under the terms of the agreement, the funding, just as a reminder, the funding goes to the Economic Development Corp. They hold those funds. So the Economic Development Corp. cannot spend those funds for us on other purposes within the city when their concentration and their book of business is the Commerce Park. So in order for us to spend those funds elsewhere, we would have to not enter into this agreement, and that way the city would retain the funds. Does that make sense?
And that is
May not be
exactly the
explaining
concern.
myself correctly.
So I'm for the city retaining the funds. I don't think we want to give up control of the funds. So,
So there's a motion on the floor. I don't think we ever got a vote on the motion.
I made the motion.
Well, I mean, we have a
Oh.
motion on the floor to accept this.
Okay.
You
But has
just
that
did
I
it.
been
made the
seconded?
motion to amend it.
I don't know that anybody seconded.
I
the
didn't, I
motion.
don't recall a second.
No.
Yeah. We never. We have a motion,
And then I made the amendment.
He made a motion to amend it, but it was never
but
seconded.
never
so-
got seconded.
Correct.
So it failed.
Right.
So
I'll withdraw the motion then. If it's not gonna be
well, it just
seconded.
died. It died for lack of a second, but, so. Call the question. All in favor of the resolution to enter into the agreement with BCEDC? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
nay.
Well, that's 3-1 in opposition. Do you have that,
Would have
Tracy?
failed anyway.
Okay.
Because 2-2 would have been a vote, so, don't clap. Out of order. Call the mayor.
You want to call, yeah, but say, air back in.
Probably in their sleep.
Oh, don't say that.
We have city manager's report. Have we covered everything on the agenda?
Yep.
So we're on that city manager's report.
Yeah.
Are we ready?
Right, I guess next is city manager's report.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got some good news for you. My reports are going to be shorter from now on. And that's partially because the bridge report that we issue every week kind of takes the need for being long-winded on council evening nights. But I do have a few things to cover with you. I do want to cover with you that paid parking in the marina parking lot has been suspended since November. We're aware of that. That was primarily to help offset the inconvenience to downtown visitors that was posed by the earlier closure of the intersection of Bay Street and Charles Street. Since this intersection has now been open for some time, on May 1, the suspension of paid parking at the marina parking lot will be revoked, and patrons parking there will need to use the parking kiosk to pay for parking again. We'll get the word out on that as well. This is the first time I'm revealing this, so we'll put this out on social media and be sure people are well aware. Next Tuesday, April 21st at 5 p.m., staff will present the city manager's suggested consolidated budget for fiscal year 2027 in a special work session at City Hall. The public is invited to attend in person or via the usual electronic means. Residents and stakeholders are invited to attend the Waterfront Park Design Concepts public meeting where proposed concept designs for repair or replacement of the relieving platform at Waterfront Park will be presented and discussed. The meeting will take place Wednesday, April 22nd, from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. with a formal presentation by McSweeney Engineers beginning at 5:30 PM. The event will be held at the Waterfront Park Pavilion, and City Hall will be the backup location in the event of inclement weather. And I'm happy to report that today crews began installing the new 4-foot-high commercial-grade black aluminum decorative fencing in the Waterfront Park, otherwise known as the Beaufort Friendly Fencing, to replace the industrial chain link fence that's been in place since the relieving platform was closed last summer. It should improve aesthetics and will be followed by the placement of several bench swings along the fence. Are there any questions from council?
Any questions, comments? Okay, now to the mayor's report. In the interest of time, I'm just going to hand Tracy what I have down here and move on to reports by council members. I'll start on my right. Councilman Mitchell.
Okay, well, I'm glad you guys had a short report from mine, a little longer than yours. Neil and I attended, sorry, thanks. My apology. Neil and I attended the Leadership Day at Joseph Shanklin School last week, and I must say it was very interesting and entertaining watching the young students performing and leading also. So just want to say thanks to the folks out at Shanklin. Also, just want to say thanks to, I think Brenda Litchfield led that effort at our city's library last week. And that conversation, I think, was very productive, helped to inform my perspective going forward. And while we didn't reach a decision tonight, I think we're much closer. So just want to thank, it was a very civil conversation among those who attended from a number of the neighborhoods, Northwest Quadrant, Old Commons, I think Pigeon Point, I think Mossy Oaks folks were there too. The last thing I want to share with you, and this is something I wrote down, and it's in regard to Mr. Alvin Bradford Pazant. I think the Pazant name is familiar to many of persons in the room, especially those of my vintage anyway. So I wrote this down. He passed away just recently. So I would like to give honor to the late Mr. Alvin Bradford Pazant, the Beaufortonian, celebrated low country musical legend and renowned trumpeter, passed away on April 6th at the age of 84. Mr. Pazant was the son of the late Edward Pazant, and Gullah Festival founder, the late Rosalie Frazier Pazant. Relatives about town that may be familiar to you include his sister, Mrs. Charlotte Pazant Brown, and niece, Pazanta Byers. Pazanta currently serves on our city's Tourism Advisory Committee. Following graduation from Robert Smalls High School, Alvin matriculated at Florida A&M University, where he majored in music and was a member of their marching band. Upon graduation from FAMU, he went on to a remarkable career with the Lionel Hampton Orchestra. Indeed, I shared with his sister Charlotte this morning my memory of her brother Alvin coming into his mother's classroom at Robert Smalls in 1967 when I was a junior there to say goodbye before he and his members of Hampton's band departed town. Mr. Pazant also taught jazz in New York. Along with his late brother Eddie, they formed the Pazant Brothers Jazz and Funk Band. He sung bass for 30 years with the Grammy Award-winning R&B group, the Manhattans, and toured with famous stars such as Eartha Kitt, Della Reese, and Gladys Knight. May he be remembered as a native son of Beaufort, a world-class musician, and a musical ambassador for America. A celebration of life is scheduled for 10 o'clock a.m. this coming Thursday, day after tomorrow, at Bethesda Christian Fellowship. To the Pazant family, I personally, and hopefully on behalf of our city, offer our most sincere condolences for the loss of their brother and uncle. Yeah.
Very nice.
Thank you. I know that.
Councilman McPhee.
None.
Okay.
No need to say a
Ms.
word.
Galais.
I'll be really quick. I just want to say, on March 25th, I was able to attend the Beaufort County Awareness Group. I try to attend every month there. And I think that group stands out to me primarily because their purpose was born in the fact that somebody had lost their child, and they said, you know what, I want to stand up an organization that tries to just engage our public officials and try to get monthly updates and figure out where we can work in and be part of the solution. And so I try to go and provide monthly updates to where we are in the city with happenings. And then usually we have a representative from the police department that does a very good job at providing updates for the month on calls that they received, and talks about some of the initiatives that we planned for different neighborhoods and how we intend to bring crime rates down. So with that being on March 25th, I was not able to attend the Point party, which I hate because I was looking forward to conversations there, and unfortunately you can't be two places at once. April 3rd, I was able to go to First Friday, which my kids always enjoy, and we were able to get some ice cream and play at the park and enjoy the festivities. So I appreciate downtown operations and all the work that goes into putting in First Fridays. Last Friday, I was able to attend as just an observer, not as a speaker, the Leadership Beaufort, which they had Government 101, and City Manager Scott Marshall was there. And I'll just say that he did an excellent job fielding very hard questions for over an hour. And instead of giving a presentation, he just kind of immediately opened it up to, you know, what are your concerns? What questions do you guys have? And it was a feisty group. And so they were asking some very pointed questions. And just as somebody that was, you know, in the audience observing it, I think that Scott did an excellent job at responding to those and fielding those questions. So I want to acknowledge that. And then last night, I attended the Waterfront Advisory Committee meeting, which we learned that we'll have the renderings in the public charrette on April 22nd at 5 p.m. and the presentation will start at 5:30. So I'm looking forward to being there and excited that we've at least reached that next step. Hopefully now we can continue moving forward and get the park restored, determine what alternative design we will go with. And I really just wanted to say quickly that this is off script here, but Miss Deckard, you know, identified that there was a potential conflict, you know, with the mayor and the Beaufort County Economic Development Corporation. And I recognize the importance of not just having two readings, but having constituents that are actively engaging in the process and helping us pick out some of those things that we missed. It would be better for us, obviously, to catch that as either council or staff or our legal team prior to first reading. But the fact that we had a constituent that flagged that, brought it to our attention, and the fact that we have a mayor with enough integrity to say, you know what, I think you're right, I'm going to recuse myself from this, because he could have taken a different approach. And I'll tell you, when she first brought it up, I told myself, I know one thing for sure. I haven't known the mayor very long, couple of years, but I know that he would never intentionally put himself in the way of a financial benefit or a conflict at all. And so I knew it was just one of those things that, you know, you miss. And so I appreciate not only the fact that we have constituents that are willing to bring those hard things to our attention, but the fact that we have representatives in the mayor in this case to have enough integrity to recognize that and recuse himself. With that, I appreciate everybody's time and the fact that you've been here for so long. Thank you.
Last but not least.
Thank you. I'll keep it kind of brief. Countless events I've been to. Couple of note, First Friday, Linda and your crew, you did a great job. Enjoyed stopping there, talking to you and everything. Y'all did a great job. Fire department today and police department at Southside Park. They had a ton of kids there. They did a great job in there, and they had tug of war. They had kind of Frisbee type thing, and I did not do any of it. I got out of there before the fire department came, actually. I was there with the PD for a little bit. Great job on that. Arsenal, they had a showing of the movie Beaufort on the Brink of War. I don't remember the exact title, but it was very well produced. Very good movie. Anyway, a lot more, but I won't go into all that because I know everybody's tired and I know I am. So with that, I will make a motion that we go into executive session pursuant to Title 30, Chapter 4, Section 70A2 of the South Carolina Code of Law, discussion regarding the purchase or sale of property. 1, 1100 boundary. 2, 2153 boundary. 3, let's see, Commerce Park Lot B, Commerce Park Lot D, Commerce Park Lot K, and pursuant to Title 30, Chapter 4, Section 70A, 1 of the South Carolina Code of Law, discussion regarding personnel appointed by City Council. I make a motion, we go into executive session.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.